and members of the public who've attended, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you enjoy the meeting. And without further ado, we'll get started with the procedure of the meeting. But, you know, and I know it's got on item 1 planning, but what we're going to do this evening is take it further down and have it on item number 5. So we'll just be going through the, you know, 1 or 2 bits of information minutes before we'll go to planning, to the planning chair. And Brian will be as the planning chair, and he'll be taking over. Well, well, first of all, councillors, are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. I've got Councillor Posh. He says he's going to be late, but he's on his way.
Oh, thank you very much, Daniel. Anyone else?
Chair, I have Raymond Whelan's apologies.
All right, thank you very much, Rebecca. We'll move strictly on to the minutes of the previous meeting, and we'll go page by page. And if, first of all, could I have anyone that was there that could reaffirm that the minutes is a true and proper record? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll go page by page. Anybody's got to raise on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? 4? 5? 6. Oh, thank you very much, councillors, and thank you for that. Any disclosures of interests, please?
Yes, Chair, I have. I want to disclose an interest in the planning application, which I've already predetermined I've already declared my intentions around, and I will be leaving the room.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much. Thank you. Got that noted. Well, without further ado, I will hand it over to the Chair of Planning, Councillor Gallagher, who will be going through the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In front of us, we've got a plan application which is 21/01624/COU.
Sorry, Brian. Sorry. Excuse me. Sorry. Sorry, Eileen. Do you want to come in?
Yes, I do. It's on item 5, Chair. I want to propose a motion, but I also want to tell you why I want to propose this motion, right? Section 5 says, please note that printed letters of objection and support are no longer circulated with the agenda, but are available on the councillor's website. I want to know who made this decision, when this decision was made, and who made the decision. And my motion is that we go against this decision, because I really feel we should have objections circulated in paper form and not go to the planning portal, which is sometimes fairly hard to navigate, right? I do know for this current application that we're going to look at tonight, there's actually 38 objections and 24 comments for it. However, when you get these objections with the planning papers, it actually gives you a feel of how the people who live in close proximity to where the planning application form has been put in, it gives you a feel of why they're objecting. So my motion is that we disagree with this comment on here, and we tell the officers that we want these objection letters circulated as have had in the past. We've always had them circulated with the planning papers. So all I need now is a seconder for my motion.
Have we got?
Sorry, can I just stop you there?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Cardy, I think it is. I hear what you're saying, and I think you can raise it as an issue that you want to be looked at, but I don't think you can propose any motion about that. Motions without notice, there's nothing that it would fall under that you would be able to propose a motion in respect of that. I think it's something that certainly myself and Judith can raise with the Director of Planning, that you're not happy about it, but there's no specific motion that you can make in respect of that.
Okay, well, I'll come back on a second point, and this is really important, right? If we can't get these papers circulated, like I would like them circulated, like they've always been circulated, right? I want my papers circulated to me I don't want them in hard. I don't want to have to go and navigate around the planning portal for letters of objection. I want them on pink papers because I have a disability. And if I don't get them on pink papers, that's something, I think you'll be able to do that, to be fair, but I require mine on hard copy if I can't.
I think that's certainly
Thank you,
something
Eileen.
valid that you're raising,
Yeah.
and we can take that back to the Director of Planning. You know, you asked who made that decision. I think it was principally made in respect of the virtual committees. I could be wrong. Judith might know in respect of that. But certainly there's no motion that you can put in respect of
Well, I still want this looked at, and I'm still saying to you, we don't want this as a group. We want the hard copies, right? And really, this should have come to the council. This should have come to the members. It should not have just been made by officers in the first place.
Thank you, Eileen. Kath, did you want to say?
That's the question I wanted to ask. Who determined this? Because, you know, we should be notified on this. And none of them have.
Yeah,
It's the first time I've seen that tonight.
Yeah, I totally agree, by the way. I think we should have hard copies because it's vitally important that we do see the objections of what people have in, as well as the people who, put the applications on, and it gives you time to study them. It really does.
Can I also just say, though, there's a lot of people that can't get out that portal properly and they don't understand the planning. So when you got in the hard copy, you do understand it more. So that's one of the reasons.
Thank you. Well, I
Chair,
hope
Chair,
that...
can I just come in on that? I've raised all the concerns about the portal, and in a meeting with the director yesterday, and maybe Judith can come in and give a little bit of clarity on it and maybe some direction. But if there is any issues or problems around the portal, my suggestion is that we'll run for hard copies for our next 2 meetings and see how it works and filters out. But I'll bring Judith in.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add, really, other than all I can do is take this back to Rob Murphy and discuss it further. I don't actually know where it came from, where that decision came to stop hard copies coming out. But I'll certainly make all the inquiries and I'll come back to you and let you know.
Thank you. But what I will say, whatever he says, and if he says we have to have them on the portal, I want to vote on it because I really don't agree with it. Right.
Well, Eileen, I don't think any of us objects to that because we all agree that we need to have hard copies. So whether he agrees with it or not, we want hard copies.
Exactly. Thank you.
Right, Chair. Sorry, we'll get back to the plan application. So are you quite happy with that, Eileen? Before we move on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, Brian.
Thank you very much. The planning application is 21//01624/COU, and it's a change of use of a ground floor from retail to hot food takeaway with auxiliary storage on the first floor. Now, before we go into it, I would like to try and update members and members of the public of the protocol as step by step. The chair myself will introduce the application. The planning officer will give updates and changes to any recommendations presented in the report. Then it'll be public speaking. It'll be objectors, the local council, councillor or parish councillor, and the applicant. Each of those individuals will get 5 minutes to have their say, and that will be on a timer. Then after that, it'll be members' questions to planning officers. Now, I've got to emphasise that will just be members of the planning committee that will be asking those questions. And the rules of the debate is that we have a proposal, a seconder, and then that will open another debate within the elected members. Then from there, we'll have a vote, and it'll be by majority or with the chair casting that vote. So I hope that tells you a little bit of the procedure that will happen. So that being said, I've introduced the planning application. I've given you the reference number and I've given you the proposal. Could I bring in Ryan now, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just an update to members prior to the presentation. The application site is located within a designated town centre by the Wansbeck District Local Plan, where the provision of town centre facilities are permitted. if they are well located in relation to the community that they serve. This is outlined within policy RTC1, which wasn't sort of clearly referenced within sort of the officer report. Moving on to the presentation. The application seeks planning permission for the change of use of a vacant retail premises to a hot food takeaway. The application site is located within the settlement of Newbiggin by the Sea in a prominent position along the front street. The site also falls within the designated heritage asset recognised as Newbiggin Conservation Area. Minor alterations are proposed to the rear of the premises for the installation of ventilation equipment and a flue. New signage is also expected upon the front elevation. However, this would require a separate advertisement consent application and does not form part of this assessment. The application site is bounded by an existing commercial premises to the east, with residential flats bonding the site to the west. These site photographs show views of the site from the front street. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out within the officer report. That's all.
No, I believe the first speaker is a Mr. Derek Brassel. Could you indicate who you are, please?
Yes, that's me.
Sorry, could you put your hand up, sorry?
Yeah.
Yep. You'll have 5 minutes, which will be on the timer. There's no pressure. Please just, say what you've really got to say.
Okay, thank you. The photo of the two residential flats that are joined to the property, that's my flats, and the person above is a man called Mr. Holroyd, who's not here today, as he's like a semi-invalid. He's quite ill at the moment. We are probably the ones that it affects more than anybody, because obviously nobody wants a fish up attached to the side of your house up until 12 o'clock at night with kids and potential queues outside your bedroom windows. Mr. Holroyd's flat upstairs, his rear window is probably about 2 metres from where they're planning to put the flue and the extractor fan, with smells emitting and possible, the potato peeler's going to be out the back as well, possible vibration noises, and it's literally probably about 2 metres. So if he opens his back bedroom window, he could probably reach out and almost touch the side of the building where it's going to be. Out the front, on the lower level, is my bedroom window where my 6-year-old child stays every Wednesday and weekend with me. It is probably about 2 metres from this fish shop. And as everyone knows, on a busy night, there could be queues actually standing outside my bedroom window. We go to bed when my child stops at about 9 o'clock. I'm in bed by about 10, and this is requiring, it's applied for this fish shop is applied for a 12 o'clock licence. Also, the bins out the back is probably about 3 metres from Mr. Holroyd's upstairs flat bedroom window. Now, previous businesses there had bins with cardboard in. The bins at this place are going to have rotten food, waste food, which could attract possible flies and vermin. There's been for years, about 15 years I've lived there now, and there's always been a vermin problem, which comes from a land area probably about 30 metres away, like a vacant lot. So about 5 or 6 times now there's been pest control out there. Mr. Holroyd, as I say, who lives upstairs, who couldn't make it today, is a semi-invalid. He was on a breathing machine probably a year and a half ago, so he doesn't get out much. He goes to bed at 9 o'clock every night, so it's going to affect him in the same way as this. And his 4-year-old grandchild stays every weekend with him, and they stop in the same bed, which is the front bedroom out the front, where there could be possible queues. And also, these are a bit of a magnet for young kids hanging around takeaways till 9, 10 o'clock at night. I'm sure nobody here would like the idea of a fish shop being attached to the side of the house. There's always been a business next door, and we love the idea of a business next door. We never heard it. I've been there 15, 16 years now. You never hear a noise out of them. But hot food licenses is a completely different kettle of fish. Can I just conclude that I mean, Newbiggin is saturated with takeaways. There's another licence being granted for a one 25 metres away on the prom outside Bertarelli's Cafe. He's hoping to open in the next 2 or 3 months. So you're going to have probably 3 fish shops within maybe 150 metres and 2 or 3 pizza shops all within that area. When other businesses come into a town, they don't bring more money to the town. They just take a slice of the cake themselves. So it's just going to be at the deficit of some other business. Some other business is going to lose takings, possibly lay off staff. So it could help create unemployment in the town. These people aren't from Newbiggin, so it's not like a Newbiggin people starting a business. I think if this hot food licence is granted, I can comfortably say it's pretty much going to destroy my life, and especially Mr. Holroyd's life. I mean, I'm horrified at the thought at 9 o'clock on a weekend when I go to bed with my little 6-year-old, that there's going to be a queue stand outside my door on a busy Saturday night. Currently, the street after 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock, is deserted. You never hear a peep. On a Saturday night, sometimes you hear the odd couple, maybe about 10 o'clock walking past, but that's about it. A fish shop hot food licence, literally 2 metres from my bedroom window and Mr. Upstairs bedroom window, Mr. Holroyd's upstairs bedroom window, will literally destroy that. There's no way it couldn't affect us severely. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Please don't allow a licence for this property. This isn't a position for a hot food licence. It's too close to residential properties. Thank you.
From a local councillor or parish councillor to have any comments? Although I've noticed that they are on the report from the parish council. The next applicant to speak is Tony Carter. Tony, could you indicate who you are? Thank you very much. It'll be the same procedure again, 5 minutes. We will indicate, and sorry for this, but we will indicate when your last minute's there. Okay. Thank you very much. No.
Well, thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee, for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of the applicant in favour of these proposals. I'd also like to thank your planners, especially Mr Sorsby, for what is a professional and balanced appraisal of these proposals. Members of the Planning Committee will have noted from the officer report that it would appear that a significant number of objections have been received. Whilst the applicant acknowledges that it is the right to make comments on an application, from our own research of the comments and the local knowledge of the applicant, it's clear that there has been a significant amount of canvassing to attract these objections from a small number of individuals. The majority of comments made, aside from that of the neighbour, are, I would suggest, based on the perceived competition from the takeaway venture and not a true reflection on how the general public feel about these proposals. Equally, a significant number of members of the public support these proposals, and the Town Council, who are in the process of advancing their neighbourhood plan, also offer their support, stating in their response to the application that Newbiggin by the Sea Town Council support the application for the change of use and find it encouraging that a business is willing to invest in our local economy and bring employment opportunities when so many businesses have closed their doors in surrounding towns as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We would therefore urge the Planning Committee not to give too much credence to the number of objections, but instead their content. I'm sure members will agree that town councillors know their area far better than most of us, and will hopefully agree with them that by bringing a vacant building back into use in such a prominent location on the street scene can only benefit the area. Newbiggin is now, and has been for some time, a tourism destination. People from all over the country visit the town, stay here and at nearby tourist sites and come to see the attractions such as the couple statue out at sea, its smaller copy on the promenade, St Bartholomew's Church, the War Memorial, the Maritime Centre and the various artisan shops that's in Newbiggin. The last thing we want to see is vacant shop fronts. Members, please be assured we have not discounted the relevant objections made to the proposals. We've actually actively sought to address these matters. In terms of the comments made regarding noise and odour, we commissioned professional assessments to identify any issues which might arise. These assessments found no negative impacts on neighbours or the area of the site. Further, these proposals have facilitated unsightly external plant that served the previous retail unit to be removed, providing a betterment both in visual, noise and odour amenity terms. Your environmental health officers have sight of these assessments, assessed them and agree with their findings that the proposals will not adversely impact on neighbouring properties and therefore raise no objections. With regard to highway safety, while the takeaway will have different customer peak hours, these will not result in a significant difference in traffic generated by the permitted use of the premises as a shop. Adequate parking provisions are located to the front and to the rear, and the deliveries and the servicing strategy for the site is in keeping with the neighbouring and the adjacent commercial buildings. Your highways officers have been consulted, commented on and agreed that the proposals are acceptable and offer no objection. Taking account of any impact on the conservation area, no external changes are proposed to the building frontages, save for the repainting of the external elevation. The proposal will therefore not cause harm to the conservation area, both in the visual character of the application site or the surrounding area. So, members, to summarise, your planners, along with your conservation officer, your highways officer and the EHOs are in favour of the proposals. While some objectors have identified potential issues regarding noise, odour and highway safety, your planning officers, along with your specialists, have considered the proposals will not bring about any harm. It's both our view and that of your officers that the reasons for objecting have either been overcome or have been clarified by your specialist officers that no detriment will be caused to amenity or safety. We therefore urge the Planning Committee to accept your officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
The planning officers. And I have to emphasise it'll just be members that will be asking these questions. So are there any members that want to ask any questions? Councillor Parry.
Are all the names on the petition from Newbegin? Because sometimes they aren't.
In terms of the petition that was submitted, an objection to the application, yeah, they were all submitted by sort of Newbigin residents. In terms of the objections and support comments that were provided, in terms of individual comments, there was a mixture of sort of residents from Newbigin and then sort of residents from sort of neighbouring towns and villages as well.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, we can accept comments from sort of any member of the public in terms of an application. We do consult with sort of the immediately adjacent neighbours, and as this site is within sort of a conservation area, it's advertised sort of within the press as well, so we can accept comments from sort of residents from any location.
Right.
Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to ask, when have they done the assessment for noise? Because, you know, if the shop's vacant at this present moment in time, how could they assess the impact of noise? And another question I might add is, where would the bins be situated? Because if it's a frontage of the shop, where would they? Because obviously they have to have special bins. Where will they be placed? Because that could attract, if it's going around the back of the shop, it could attract vermin and children. I mean, I'm not saying children, but some people tip bins over, and you know, there's rubbish all over the place. So how is that going to be protected around the back? Because, you know, there's a lot of issues we have with attracting vermin, especially with bins and when they turn them over. And we have issues as it is with, you know, shall I say, not sometimes getting the streets and everything swept up, you know, on time, etc. So I've just got a concern around that. And as far as parking is concerned, parking outside that area, because having lived and grown up all my life in Newbigin, I suspect it will be an issue on Newbigin Main Street. Thank you, Chair. So if I could have those questions, you know, answered, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the noise assessment that was undertaken by sort of the consultant, that was undertaken in April 2021, and that's sort of been appropriately assessed by sort of our environmental health officer. I mean, if they did have any concerns regarding the contents of that noise assessment, they could have requested sort of further assessments be undertaken, but they didn't raise any sort of concerns regarding that, subject to the conditions within sort of the officer report. Yeah, you're correct in sort of stating that the refuse storage bins will be located to sort of the rear of the premises. I'm not necessarily sure that it would be sort of a material planning consideration as towards sort of any impact to sort of these bins. I'm not sure if Judith would like to step in and add any further comment to that.
I mean, if if we've got details of sorry, where the bin storage will be, that's really all we're required to look at. I mean, we could ask for some further details of, you know, how often those bins are going to be emptied and the likes. We could add a condition that advisors then ask them to give us that information and have that considered to make sure that that was going to be acceptable. We could add a condition on in that regard.
Just come back to my first question, please, Brian.
Yes.
You haven't actually answered me because officers going down to do a noise assessment when the premises is not open doesn't give me any satisfaction whatsoever because the premises is empty. So obviously there won't be the noise there that you expect when the fish shop's up and running on a weekend when there's a lot of people coming out to pubs and clubs, etc., that be standing queuing up, and there's residents who are disturbed and can't get their rest. So I can't see how that they've done an accurate assessment. Sorry.
Chair, if I could just clarify on that, the noise assessment isn't really taking account of the noise that the voices might make of people visiting those shops. It's more about the noise of plant and machinery that might have to be installed to serve that premises and to serve the business. So extraction equipment, all of that kind of stuff that generates noise, that's what the noise assessment is for, more than sort of the noise of the voices from people who visit the shop. So it doesn't really matter when they undertake that, that's what they're looking at, whether the premises is empty or not. They're looking at you know, the equipment that needs to go with that business and what sort of noise that will generate.
Yeah, but with all due respect, it still hasn't given me my answer as to what, yes, that included as well, the impact, and if there's residents living around that surrounding area, how is that going to impact them? Because it's not up and running, so how would you be able to assess what noise, and if people's gone down to just to give an idea what's going on, they haven't given me an answer. I'm sorry to keep going on, but, you know, people who live around the area and indeed next door, they are going to be impacted with noise because obviously there'll be fans and generators going and stuff like that. It just to me, it just seems to be, you know, prejudging what, you know, the application's all about with regard to noise in the situation for the residents who live there.
I think it's a retail unit as it is, so the way the use classes work now and the changes the government have made, that it can actually change into various uses without planning permission anyway. So, you know, it's our control over that is very limited regardless. And, you know, it's sort of the noise of voices is really a worst case scenario. I think with fish and chip shops, it tends to be more, you know, people visit, they come out, they go. There's rarely sort of massive queues down the road on fish and chip shops. It's more sort of steady flow kind of thing. So, you know, there's maybe a handful of people in at any one time come out. So by its nature, people are in and out. So it's not a noise generating type business, you know, to the point where it would give such disturbance to the residents round about, which is, I mean, if Environmental Health had genuine concerns about that, they would have raised it, but clearly they haven't. So, you know, because of the nature of the use, it's not a sort of noise in terms of people making, you know, like a pub where, you know, the decibels go up, people get louder. It's not like that. And as I say, people are in and they're out. So it's not really a sort of noise generating type business in the sense of voices and people.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. Well, as a person who was born and bred in Newbiggin, I beg to differ because it is a tourist industry, and then there's a lot of people visits Newbiggin on a daily basis. People who don't live in the area too, and you know, and residents can't park, you know, where they can now in certain car parks and facilities. But and yes, they do queue because on the main street. So I've seen queues around the other fish shop that's on the main street. So they do queue. And it will be at night time, and I'm sorry, but there's plenty of pubs and clubs around there, and then we have this all over where there's people residential, and there's these, you know, like hot food takeaway shops in the evening, and you know, and I think it's about time we considered residents who live in the area and how they feel. You know, it's okay granting planning applications all the time for hot food takeaways, but we've also got to take into consideration the residents and the impact that it has on their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's your decision at the end of the day, members. I'm just sort of advising you as to what we can and can't take into consideration. And, you know, we've had environmental health assess this, the professionals assess it, and they don't have any issues with it. So all I can do is really, you know, relay that back to you, but ultimately, you know, it's your decision as members at the end of the day.
Thank you. Next person that indicated was Councillor Watson.
If I could just come in on the bin situation, it's in 7.21 where it states that the refuge bins will only be allowed to the front of the property on refuse collection day. So I think that point that was made before about how many times that's going to be collected. But what I noted was that that's not enforceable by the local planning authority. So my question would be, can any other department in the council enforce if the bins are left out on the street? Because that is a problem with hot food takeaways where bins are often left out longer than they should be, which then creates antisocial behaviour and disturbance. And obviously for the flats next door, that's not going to be very pleasant for those bins to be there. Thank you.
Ryan, do you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, that's certainly something that sort of our highways team could enforce upon. Obviously, sort of the land to the front of the site is sort of a public footpath, which will be sort of owned by sort of the local highways authority, so they can certainly, they've certainly got the power in terms of enforcing sort of refuse storage that was stored upon that land. So that's something that they could address it if it was to be an issue sort of moving forward.
So when it was mentioned about the condition that you can put on for the bin collection, can I propose that that's added to the planning so that that information is known to how often the bins are collected?
Our sort of planning enforcement team have sort of confirmed sort of in the past with previous planning applications that it's not enforceable under sort of planning terms because it fails the one of the 6 tests in terms of planning conditions, that it would require sort of permanent sort of like visits to the site to check that they're actually complying with that condition. So it actually fails sort of the tests for a condition, but there is separate legislation in terms of what highways can enforce of sort of use of their land. So it is something that highways could deal with, but planning enforcement have previously sort of advised that it's not an enforceable condition, and if we were to grant planning permission and the applicant appealed that condition, it would likely be that it would be overturned at appeal.
Can I ask, has consideration been made on how many hot food takeaways are already in New Biggin, and if there is a need for another one?
Yeah, I think it's obviously sort of granted that and raised by sort of objectors that there is a number of existing hot food takeaways within sort of New Biggin, but there isn't any sort of planning policy or any planning restrictions that limit the amount of hot food takeaways that will be situated within sort of an area. So there isn't sort of any grounds in terms of planning that we can refuse an application on just because there's sort of a number of hot food takeaways within that area.
Thank you for that. Got a number of people that want to come in, so that will be Councillor Ball, Nesbitt, and Daniel jumped the gun, but we'll be fine on that one. So I'll bring Councillor Ball in.
Thanks, Chair. So just with one of my questions is with regards to the deliveries. Obviously, there is a number of delivery services now that is going to have an impact on the highways. Will deliveries be going right the way up till midnight with traffic coming and going? Because we have seen this is an issue in other areas, that the parking on the high street in New Biggin is not fantastic to start with. So if we're going to have delivery drivers coming and going till all hours, it is going to have an impact on the local residents. And with regards to being in the New Biggin Conservation Area, should we not be looking at the mix of businesses in New Biggin? There is a national policy on healthy high streets and looking at the mix of businesses. Do we really need an extra takeaway of any kind in New Biggin? It's like we should really be looking at what goes into that conservation area, tourism, and what's needed there. And I really think we need to start looking at this at the planning stage, because if we just fill high streets with vape shops, chip shops, whatever to fill units, it's not the best thing for the high streets in any town, and definitely not New Biggin as a tourist.
I think in terms of sort of the first point in terms of deliveries, sort of our highways team actually clarify it within sort of their consultee comments, and they've sort of stated that the deliveries and servicing strategies proposed are in keeping with those of neighbouring and adjacent commercial businesses, and it is noted that there are existing parking restrictions in areas designated for loading along the frontage of the front street. So our highways team haven't raised any objection in terms of sort of deliveries to and sort of from the application site. In terms of sort of the conservation sort of query, again, we've sort of consulted with our sort of building conservation team on this application, and building conservation raised no objection to the application. They didn't consider that there would be any significant harm caused to the designated heritage asset, and that ultimately it would bring sort of a vacant unit back into use within a sort of prominent position within the heritage asset. So building conservation didn't raise any objections towards the application either.
Thank you, Ryan. Can I bring in Councillor Nesbitt, please?
Just a couple of comments really and the concerns. I'm a member for Blyth, and I've got this ongoing problem in Blyth already with takeaway shops, the bins outside the back door. The problem you've got is it's coming along with seagulls coming along, picking up it, and it's going to go on. And I mean, I don't care what you say about enforcing it. It'll never happen. You can do as much as you like, but it won't happen. The other concern I've got is the neighbours that live next door to it in their flats. The odour coming from the shop, the oils and that come, the spillage, it goes on and on and on. So, you know, and it is a conservation area, and that's my big concerns on that.
Ryan, do you want to come in and answer a couple of those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, just in sort of terms of the odour that would be generated, obviously the applicant provided sort of an odour assessment as part of the application submission, which had been a sort of appropriately assessed by our public protection team, and condition 6 within the officer report sort of maintains that the kitchen extraction system would provide a high level of odour control, which would protect the amenity of neighbouring sort of residents. Sorry, what was the first question relating to?
Just about the bins in itself. How can we make sure that the bins are kept in at all times, especially on unless on removal day? The concerns there that they won't adhere to it. I'll tell you now, because I've got it in Blyth, and it happens really regularly. So I would be quite worried about all that, because it attracts the seagulls, it attracts the pigeons, and they make such a mess. And as we talked about it being a conservation area to start with, do we really need any more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sort of the planning application stipulates that sort of the bins would be securely stored to the rear of the premises and only sort of taken out sort of on the day of collection. But if sort of members felt that we sort of need a condition in relation to that, we could sort of add a condition that a refuse storage be provided, so that sort of sufficient sort of refuse collection is sort of secured via condition. If members felt strongly about that, that's something that we could add.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lang, did you indicate?
Just a quick question, Ryan. Can we get this back up? Yeah. Can you tell me what the brown square is in it?
This part here, is that the one? At the bottom, sort of here.
That's like yes, that area there. What is that?
That's just an existing sort of offshoot, which is incorporated on the back of the premises, the brick built sort of offshoot.
Is that something that can be used? Is it going to be used inside the business, or is it something that can be used for the storage of the bins?
Well, it sort of forms part of the main building, so I don't think it would be sort of capable to be sort of used as refuse storage. I think it would be sort of utilised as sort of internal storage or sort of back of house sort of equipment storage or something like that.
So the bins are just going to stand outside?
They'll be within sort of the rear yard, which is in this area.
And will you not ask for a secure, even if it's just a mesh cage or something to put the bins into? I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, that's what when Ryan referred to the refuse strategy, refuse condition before, that's kind of what they incorporate. So we just ask for more information from the applicant as to where they're going to be stored. And they may be able to tell us how often they're going to be collected, but that will obviously fall in line with the collections that you know, the
I
council
think
do.
I think if I'm going to have bins there, I'd like to have them secured.
I mean, I think
In a cage of some sort.
I don't know if we could go as far as ask them to put them in a cage. I think what we can do is incorporate this within the refuse strategy condition that we ask if we add that on, and it just gets them to provide us with more information in line with what you're suggesting. It's just, obviously the application is in, so, you know, how it's going to be set out is what we're considering now. So to start going a bit, you know, far away from that, we don't know at this stage whether the applicant can do that or not. So I think by this refuse strategy condition, we can tailor that so that it requests this information. So, you know, to see if there is any facilities to have that storage incorporated into it.
Well, I hope it wouldn't need another planning permission, surely, for a cage to put 2 bins.
It wouldn't, no, I just don't want to guarantee that. We'll ask that because I don't know if it's going to be possible. But what we'll ask is for some further information from them as to more information on the refuse side of things, which we'll cover by condition, to make sure that, you know, it's covered as best it can in line with, you know, with the concerns that are being raised this afternoon.
Another question is the time of closure. Can you tell me what timescales the shop's going to be allowed to be open in?
Yeah, so that's outlined in condition number 4. No, condition number 7, sorry. So the condition sort of hours are the premises shall only operate between the hours of 12 to 24 midnight, sort of 7 days a week. That's the sort of hours that would be conditioned on that. And again, we've consulted with sort of our public protection team who would assess those hours, and they've raised no objection to that.
Thank you. Are you finished, Jim?
No. Well, I'm just a little, just personal thing is I'm a little bit disappointed in how the shop's going to look. We had a Porter's Town team there a couple of years ago, and we tried to convert the shops back to a more traditional look, which with some success. Unfortunately, that shop was never, people there were never into that kind of thing to help us. And it's just, I think we've missed a trick here to pull that shop into a more traditional look on the street. Sorry, it's a comment rather than...
Yeah, it's, the application is just for the change of use. It's not for any external changes. So, you know, it's not really for us to insist that they do that. They're just looking for the change of use.
Making a comment, and I think it's an opportunity missed.
The reason why I've let Councillor Lang have as many questions, he's on the board, or he represents half of New Biggin as a councillor, so I think it was relevant that those points got made forward. Councillor Wallace, did you indicate that you wanted to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't represent New Biggin, although I come from New Biggin. I represent Bedlington Station, and like many areas, we have a host of takeaway shops. But it's our policy that's permitted it to happen. Anyway, that's a comment. I have 2 questions. One is, what I do find at Bedlington Station, when I leave here tonight, and it will be tonight probably, I'll find all the shops are empty. But when I get home, I'll see cars travelling, doing deliveries. Deliveries from hot food takeaways have become so prevalent in our society, particularly over the last 2 years. So my first question, Ryan, simple. Has the applicant expressed a wish to deliver fish and chips or whatever else they sell to purchasers?
There hasn't been sort of any indication within the application documents that that is sort of the plan for the application site, but there isn't anything within the use class order that would then prevent that being undertaken sort of within the future if that was sort of the intention of the applicant. If we did sort of permit that use class, they could operate sort of a delivery service within the future. There's nothing that use class restricts.
Thanks. The reason for asking that, Chair, was obviously that would reduce the amount of traffic waiting outside, which has been expressed as a fear by some councillors. The second one's quite simple as well. We introduced this at one premises only at Bedlington Station because you can't go retrospective. We've been talking about waste at the back. What about the customer who comes out and disposes of his waste at the front of the shop? Why don't we make that the responsibility of the applicant? Can that be a condition, please?
Chair, we couldn't put that on as a condition because we have no jurisdiction over that. All we could do is ask the applicant out of goodwill to provide litter bins, but then, you know, there would have to be outside of their shops, there may be pavement licences or some sort of licence to do that. I don't know because, as I say, it doesn't fall within planning jurisdiction and we couldn't put it on as a condition in that case. However, as I say, all we could do is liaise with the applicant and ask them out of, you know, goodwill and good community spirit if they'll be prepared to provide.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm quietly confident with the case that the agent put before that the applicant will be more than willing to comply with the residents within the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. We've got two other councillors that have indicated to speak and they've already spoken. Is there anybody else that needs to speak for the first time? Councillor Grimshaw Nesbitt wants to come back in. Is there anybody that needs to come in before? And Councillor Bolser. Well, I'll introduce Councillor Grimshaw first and then Councillor Nesbitt.
Thank you. I know I'm going to be rather cheeky here, but had it been another conservation area, another little town or village, would this have gone forward? And I'm just being critical about that. But in a conservation area, I totally agree with Councillor Ball saying that we should be start looking at healthy, because I know there's been, you know, a lot of controversy over, you know, hot food takeaway like McDonald's, etc., and various other outlets coming into various towns and parishes. And there's been a lot of objections about it. In a conservation area, could we possibly look at having something, like Councillor Ball said, something healthier in those premises till now, because we're trying to, you know, be fit and healthy and look to the future, and also keep that conservation area as lovely as possible, and a beautiful, beautiful little fishing village in its new begin. Thank you.
Chair, I hear what you're saying, Councillor, and it's a valid point, but as you know, the planning system can't cater for that. That would have to be some sort of shift through the local plan, maybe, or some sort of supplementary document that could be introduced. So that's a completely different ballgame and another piece of work that would have to be looked at with our policy team. But unfortunately, the way the legislation is for planning applications, it doesn't legislate for competition or too many of certain types of use in one area. So if an application comes forward, you know, as it has done today, then, you know, we're duty bound to consider it against the material planning considerations and against planning law as we know it and as we have it and deal with it. The rest has to come from, it's another entity, if you like, that would have to be dealt with separately.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Nisbet, then Councillor Ball? At the end of this, we'll move on to the next section of the procedures.
It's just an observation, Chair. It's public responses number 5. You've got the neighbour notification, number of neighbours notified 24, number of objections 38, number of support 20. That doesn't add up to me, that. Just doesn't sound, or am I being silly here?
Chair, it's just because we notified 24 people, but any amount of people can write to us. It doesn't mean that you know, anybody, 100 people could write to us if they wanted to. Just because we notified 24, there's a lot more than that can respond if they want to.
And you've got 20 number of support. Is that from the Town Council?
Well, the Town Council did support, didn't they?
Yeah, the Town Council supported the application, but the 20 support would be from sort of members of the public that have provided comments on that. Just in terms of the neighbours notified, yeah, we notified sort of 24 adjoining sort of properties and sort of businesses, but because of the location in the conservation area, there was also site notices put up in the area on sort of adjacent lampposts, and it was also advertised in the press, which obviously sort of resulted in those further comments being received.
Councillor Nesbitt, just as a point of information, I went through all the comments and there was 9 of those people that were in support were outside of the New Biggin area. Can I bring in the next speaker, Councillor Ball, please?
It's just a quick one, really, that I'm a little bit disappointed that we haven't got anybody here from Public Protection, Highways or Environmental Health to be able to, any of the officers there to be able to speak to it or ask them the questions rather than just being told they've got no objections. It would have been quite nice to being able to grill them a little bit more than just being told that there's no objections. Thank you.
That legally is that it's a statement that was made that's a strong and a valid statement. Is that something that we could request from planning?
If you wish to defer,
Or is there enough information within the planning application to move forward?
I think that's more of a question for from those specific areas to attend to answer questions.
Chair, I think with this one, because they haven't objected and the details are on the public access system and they haven't just said sort of no objection, they've gone into detail of what they've assessed, both highways and public protection, and why they've come to the decision that they have. So in planning terms, really, you know, the way it normally works is we can talk to you about that. I mean, obviously, as Melanie says, if you want, you know, to ask them questions directly, we would have to defer and bring them back to committee next time. But I think, you know, what they'll be saying is it is on the public access regardless, you know, what they've considered and how they've come to their decision.
From the chair, there's only one question I'd like to ask the officers. It seems to be a late closure of 12 o'clock at night for the premises to close. What are the times that the businesses around this particular planning application where their businesses are running as takeaways? What time do they close?
So there was a variation in sort of the closing times of sort of adjacent sort of businesses. Obviously, there's sort of adjacent, directly sort of next door, there's a bakery which has a 6 p.m. close time, I believe it was. There's a co-op opposite, and there's sort of further hot food takeaways. There's a range of closing times which sort of extend between sort of 9 p.m. and sort of 11:30 p.m. The general consensus was that they were closing around sort of 11 and 11:30, but there was a significant mix of closing times all along the front street.
Would it be a possible condition to this plan application that we reduce the closure times to about 11 o'clock and review it later?
It's certainly sort of something we could condition in terms of that. I mean, in terms of sort of the closing times, that would also be subject to a licence from our licensing team as well. So if they had any objections to sort of a midnight closing time, they could restrict the licence so that it closed at 11 p.m. But if members felt sort of necessary that we secured the under planning condition, yeah, we could sort of amend the condition if that was necessary.
Just 1 second, Councillor Grimshaw. Councillor Carty, you indicated you want to speak.
Yeah, I just want to come on the back of what Brian said. If the business shuts at 12 o'clock, doesn't necessarily mean to say the work's finished at 12 o'clock, because they will have cleaning up to do and everything like that. They will be taking stuff out of the bin, so it will be relatively noisy after 12 o'clock. Just an observation there.
Councillor Grimshaw, I've let you in twice, so the issue that I've got is, could your comments or search and questions be brought up in the debate of the next cycle, or are you desperate to
No,
come in
Chair,
with a
I'm
question for the
desperate.
officer?
I'm desperate, Chair, because I do think that, again, Councillor Bowes made a valid point about if we've got anything like, you know, as sensitive as this, because highways, because we've all got problems and issues with bin collections, rubbish, etc., we all have. And this is a major worry for myself and probably every colleague in here, because we've got issues with stuff like, so I would like it deferred, and the officers to actually come and face the councillors to ask questions, so we can actually ask them the questions that we would like to ask and see how they are actually going to address it, so we can actually see wrote down in black and white that they are actually going to do these things. Because saying they've got no objections now, that's fine. But when it comes into shop opening and stuff like that, and then we see the mess and the rubbish on the streets, and it's a beautiful little village, then the councillors from Newbiggin and the residents suffer the consequences. So I would like, and I just hope we'll get you know, colleagues to defer it until we have some officers here, so we can ask them exactly what they intend to do and implement it? Sorry, Judith, I'm being a pest.
Just taking advice that really that wasn't a question, but more like a comment. So basically, we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the rules of the debate. And that's questions between local councils. Sorry, my fault. Could we have a proposer and a seconder, please? This isn't agreeing or disagreeing with the plan application. It brings it, just takes it to the next process.
Sorry, can I just stop there? You've said you propose it, but you need to make
the debate. Open to the debate.
You need to make a proposal. So either you need to propose to grant in accordance with the officer's recommendation, or you propose to refuse it, or you propose to defer it, or for whatever reason for each thing.
Well, I'll do that again. I propose to defer it until we get officers to come and second that.
Right. Steady on, you're very keen. Right. So Councillor Grimshaw wants to propose deferral of the application for which officers to attend on the next occasion. I think is it the highways officers, environmental health,
in public protection.
Well, environmental health and public protection are the
Yes.
same thing. So it's just highways
And highways.
and an officer from public protection, which is environmental health. Is that right? So you want those two officers here
Sorry.
next time?
And conservation as well.
Good grief.
Don't think conservation have actually made any representation in respect of, sorry?
Yeah, conservation sort of provided comments on the application, sort of raising no objection. So I mean, if members felt it was necessary, sort of the building conservation officer could.
On the return that a highways officer, an officer from public protection and an officer from conservation are present on the next occasion. And so we need that seconded. Was it?
I think Councillor Nisbet sent
Councillor
it.
Nisbet wishes to second that. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace, you indicate you want to...
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I can't support that recommendation. The first reason would be the applicant could do us for non-determination, because this should have been determined in June. We're suggesting to defer for even longer. I think members should be mindful of that. The second thing is, we recently got a who's who in planning, and I would need Judith to confirm or to deny this, but if Rob Murphy, the director, was here, he would say part of his remit is to deal with public protection, to deal with conservation, to deal with highways, and to deal with the environment. And that's why these conditions appear on the agenda, because they've been discussed and condensed rather than use up staff resources. I watched the meeting last night, Chair. It took 4 hours on a local area council. I watched the one the night before, took in excess of 3 hours. Can you imagine if every officer was in attendance to answer every question, to be honest, which has already been asked between staff themselves and condensed into this report? You wouldn't get home till the next day. So, Chair, I cannot support that proposal.
Does anybody agree with Councillor Wallace on his comments? So can I now open it up to a general debate?
Chair, why don't we just go to the vote and then see if it is people want it deferred, and if they don't, then we can have a proper debate about the application.
Is everybody happy with that? Okay, then we'll go to the vote then, please. So those that are for, could they indicate, please?
That's for deferral, yeah.
Seven.
And those that are against referral?
that motion fails.
So that motion fails. We'll move on to the next process of the application. So once again, we need a proposal. So we have a proposal of Councillor Wallace. Do we have a second?
Chair, I realise many members are not happy with this application. I'm not stupid, I realise that. I have to say, as a former district councillor that put the Wansbeck district local plan in, all these questions were raised previous to 2007 with consultation with residents. Likewise, putting forward the draft local plan for the county council. And can I draw members' attention, likewise, to the emerging Newbiggin local plan. These questions have all been raised previously. The town council has shown their support. In here, it clearly states at the conclusion, it's in line with the district local plan, it's in line with the draft county plan. I'm not going to make any threats of what would happen should we refuse. It's silly doing that. It's up to everybody's right whether which way they go. But I think what's also necessary, but in the future, when the draft local plan is accepted, which is around about January, we need a serious look at what we actually do about high streets throughout the county. And I believe that is going to be part of the outlook of what the local working group will look at. What's ironic, Chair, Newbiggin is known as a fishing resort. It brings in tourists. And by refusing this place that will sell fish, we're saying, yes, come and see how they're caught, but go elsewhere to buy them, please. It doesn't ring true with me. For example, there are areas now that are becoming foodie destinations. Amble has very much become that on the quayside. I think we've all been to North Shields and seen exactly the same thing. This will give job opportunities in Newbiggin, and I hope by the conditions that's imposed in place that we follow them, Chair. So I am moving acceptance of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I think that was a little bit of a back to front way of doing it, because
Yes.
usually you say what the proposal is, then speak.
I got emotional.
But you got there in the end. So that's that the application is granted permission with the conditions in the report. That's your proposal.
Okay, was there a second there? Yeah.
I'll
Councillor
second
Parry.
it, Chair, but it needs to have the things we've talked about the bin storage and the other things added to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Can I interject?
Yes.
Sorry. So on that basis, if there's other conditions that you want included, Councillor Wallace, as the proposer, would need to say what those are and what you require, and that would need to be confirmed by the seconder.
I'm agreeing exactly what Councillor Reid's just outlined.
I think you said bins, etc., which is a little bit vague.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty keeping up with all this, but
Yes, I agree.
we've had a long discussion and a long debate. Sorry, we haven't had a debate, we've had a long question time. And things were raised during the question time. One of them was particularly about securing the bins, so there weren't, I think people are worried about rats and seagulls and pigeons, basically. So those things, that whatever they're putting the rubbish in needs to be in a secure place that birds and vermin can't get at them before they're collected. And I think the other thing we talked about was when they were going to be collected. So that was going to be, those were the two things that came out through the questioning, I believe.
I think I'd have to pass that over to Judith. You mentioned a condition about a refuse scheme strategy or something.
Yeah,
like
it would
that?
be a refuse strategy condition. We use them on other schemes, generally bigger schemes, but we could look at that with delegated powers, Chair, to yourself and Rob Murphy, to agree the exact wording of that, so that you are happy with that, and we can attach a condition in that regard, just so we've got a bit more information on the bins and how they're going to be secured in collection.
And I think that's what Councillor Wallace and I were worried about, wasn't it? Yeah. So I think that's what I'm seconding, what's written plus what we've just talked about.
Right, okay. So, so it would be, the proposal is that the application is granted with the conditions in the report, with an additional condition regarding submission and approval of a refuse strategy scheme, with the exact wording of that condition to be delegated to the Director of Planning and in conjunction with the Chair. Is that okay? And that's seconded by Councillor Reid. Right, thank you. So we can move on to the debate.
Can we open the debate now between elected members?
Chair, could I just, on one other point about the closure time for the condition, is that still something members want to see, the earlier closing time?
Yes. For myself, I think that should be a reasonable closing date that can be reviewed.
I was going to say, I mean, that's fine to do that. I would just remind members that it's obviously the applicant's, that it's the applicant's right to apply to vary conditions as well, just so if there is a variation application comes in after this, just so you're aware that they could then apply to vary that condition to change that time again.
Can I just come in there? Obviously, Councillor Wallace would need to agree to any amendment to that condition, and that would have to be agreed by the seconder. In respect of a review, there's no provision for a review. If you move that time in that condition, that will be it. As Judith has said, the applicant can come back at a later date and apply to vary that condition. But there's no provision for committee or the council to review it as such. So,
Chair, happy to agree to that. The director consults with the licensing department to come up with an appropriate time, bearing in mind it's a residential area as well. Thank you.
Say, I don't think that would be a valid condition. You can't consult with the licensing department. They're two different remits, and they may not have even applied for a licence yet.
Can I just have some clarification, because licensing did come up before there when you mentioned the hours of operation. We were, as a committee, informed licensing would be involved, and that's why I used those words.
There would only be a requirement for if hot food was to be sold between the hours of 2300 and 24 hours, there would only be a licence, a late night refreshment licence under the Licensing Act for that 1 hour. But you can't have a condition asking planning to liaise with licensing. You would need to put a time on it, essentially. So you either leave it as 2400 hours or you change it to another time.
Okay, and could I ask then, could that not be resolved similarly with the director and the chairman? He has the flavour of the committee. If you want a firm time, I'm going to say Sunday, 11 o'clock p.m.
So you'd wish to leave the hours, it's condition 7, the premises shall only operate between the hours of 1200 and 24 hours. Are you saying Monday to Saturday? And then 1200 to 23 hours on a Sunday.
Prepared to be persuaded by any other members of the council, the committee.
So that's what you are asking for in your proposal. Is that seconded?
Yeah, I'm willing to accept that. People shouldn't be eating after 9 o'clock anyway, really, should they? Very bad for your digestion.
Councillor Reid, can I bring...
Just make it 11 o'clock closing. I'm sure that's what the...
Right, well, you'll have to ask Councillor Wallace if he's prepared to. 11 o'clock every night of the week. It's your proposal.
I think we have to bear in mind.
Wallace,
We have to bear in mind it is an area that attracts tourists. The public houses aren't closing at 11, and it's it's part and parcel. But I am mindful that, as Councillor Carty said, when they close, it doesn't mean to say the business is finished, and that's what I'm trying to bear in mind. I think Sunday night 11 o'clock is more than reasonable, but everywhere else is, wherever you go in Northumberland, they're still active at 11 o'clock at night and 12 o'clock even. Yeah.
So you want to maintain that it would only be an hour shorter on the Sunday, right? And that's maintained by the seconder, right? So we'll get back to the debate.
Thank you very much. I'll open the debate between elected members only. Mr. Corey, I can see you're getting very frustrated there. No more than what we are. We want to try and do the right thing and get the right message out. It's very frustrating for us as much as it is for yourself. So I can open the debate there now between ourselves. Does anybody want to say anything else?
Just to say that coming back to the bids again, one of the things I'm worried about with the bins is not the rats that are running over, it's the kids pulling the bins over that I'm worried about. So that's why I like the bins, if we can be in arrangement to get the bins caged, if possible. If it's not possible,
It'll be
it's
covered
not
in by the
possible.
condition that we talked about earlier.
You know, if it's an open debate, Newbiggin is slowly but surely becoming a really beautiful, pleasant place to visit and holiday to. And, you know, the local councillors and the county council down there have done a tremendous job in revamping the main street. And I think that's why we're all so precious that, you know, that standard has to be maintained. And there's a responsibility there, not only from the public, but from businesses in there, to make sure that we'll continue with that. And this is why we're taking small steps forward in these decisions. So it's doing the right thing at the right time for us. So, you know, everybody, we're all from the southeast part, and whether you're from Blyth, Theaton, Sluice, Ashington, we all see those problems, and we just don't want them to accelerate in Newbiggin. Anybody else got anything to say?
Can I just say about the bins? Can you not just get lockable bins? You don't like cages, rules them or not.
Just as long as the kids can knock it over.
Well, you knock it over. Not if they're locked. There's no going to get anywhere, is there?
Right, I stand to be corrected, all I'm saying is when the bin's secure so they can be pulled over.
The bins will be secure if they're locked, aren't they? I mean...
We've not eradicated children.
No.
I think we're just going...
We're going round in circles, and the reality is I think most of the issues have been dealt with, and I think at this moment in time, and it's right what the officers have done, they've ticked the boxes on the procedure of planning very correctly. And what Councillor Wallace had said, you know, this has all been reviewed and looked at again through key officers. But I think we're precious of what areas now, because we see the deterioration there. So, you know, we just want to be doing the right thing at the right thing at the right time, and not the wrong thing at the wrong time, where it's too late to go back and change things. So, anybody else want to come in on a debate? Councillor Ball.
I just want to say, I think one of the reasons we're so passionate about this is Newbiggin is unrecognisable from what it was a few years back. From 2007, when these reports and stuff were done in the past, to now, it's a different beast. It is beautiful. It is, people are travelling from miles around. We're seeing the coastlines up and down Northumberland. People from all over the country are travelling here. It's a tourist destination, and I think we need to be very mindful of how the high streets are changing. And I think we need to be very mindful of what we're putting on them high streets and what we're saying is okay to be there. So for all, it might not be objected against through any of the officers or departments. I think we really need to be mindful of what we're saying is okay for here, because I think there's a number of things that we need to look at. And as I say, Newbiggin is fabulous. It has changed so much, and I think we really need to protect the identity of that village now and really build it up and keep on building up the tourism for the area, because it's only going to get better and better. So I just think we need to be very mindful of that, and that's why we're so passionate about it, because it's on the up and we need to keep it going that way as well.
Just on one further point, just to take everybody back to page 14 of the Newbiggin by the Sea Town Council. They are in support of this as well. So, you know, as much as we're trying to do the right thing on a county-wide thing, there's also that local issue that, you know, you've got your town council that are supporting that as well.
If there's no more debate, Councillor Wallace can sum up.
Can I bring Councillor Wallace in to sum up, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think you've just about said everything I could have wanted to say, Chairman, to be honest. But we have to be mindful. One of the things that we encourage as county councillors is to follow a charter, and that's work in partnership with the parish councils, and you've highlighted it. Newbiggin Town Council has supported this application. They're doing an emerging local plan, which is much to their credit. And they, more than anybody else, will want to revitalise the High Street. And Councillor Paul is right, the High Street is changing. And I think Newbiggin could become a foodie destination. And I'd like to see more done on that quayside and promenade in that line, in line with what's happening at North Tyneside. But that is up to them and not up to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. We'll move to the next stage, which is the vote. Can members be reminded of what they are voting for, please?
And for approval of the application, so that's granted permission, subject to the conditions contained in the report. An additional condition regarding a refuse strategy scheme to be submitted, with the wording of that condition to be delegated to the Director of Planning in conjunction with the Chair, and an amendment to condition 7 that the premises shall only operate between the hours of 1200 to 24 hours, Monday to Saturday, Sunday 1200 hours to 2300 hours. So that's the proposal.
Thank you very much. Can we now move to the vote?
All those for.
Sorry?
All those for.
All those for, please, could you show indications? All those against?
4.
Any abstentions? One abstention.
So that's carried.
Thank you very much, members. That's carried.
Yes, yes. And then there's just the appeals update for note.
Yeah. Thank you very much, councillors. Can I move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda 7, which is the appeals update, and it's just for members' information.
I'm sorry, I think the public speak, you'll have to wait until after the meeting. Okay.
Well done, you sneaked in, I never seen him.
Sorry, Chair, I think you were going through the appeals update.
Thank you very much. Can we note the appeals update in agenda 7, please? In the agenda, you've got the planning appeals decisions. You've got the planning appeals received. You've got recent enforcement. Excuse me, councillors, please. Thank you. You've got recent enforcement appeals decision. You've got the enforcement appeals received and the inquiries hearing states. So they're all there to note. Good. Councillor.
On page 28, Chair, there's a split decision. What is meant by that? What happens in that case? It's on the ADS caravan storage, Bremside Way.
That's in my ward. I was very disappointed with the decision. The split decision was that there was a number of notices allowed to advertise that particular premises. Some were allowed to stay and some weren't. So that's a split decision. Okay. Chair, are you ready for a comfort break now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. I know it's been rather long and laborious, but thank you very much anyway, Chair. I do appreciate it. And thank you for the members of the public who's been here this evening. You're quite welcome to stay if you like, but, you know, we're having a comfort break for 5 minutes. And you're quite welcome to leave if you wish to, or you could stay for, hear the rest of the meeting. But we're having 5 our Police and Crime Commissioner, Kim McGuinness, who's kindly offered to come here this evening to give us an update on what's happening in our area. And after Kim has finished her presentation, if any member would like to have any questions, well, I'm sure Kim will be delighted to answer them. But thank you very much for Kim for coming this evening. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Would you two, do you want to come and sit? Yeah. Are we recording? Yes. Lovely. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I know you've wanted me to come to a meeting for a little while, so I'm pleased that we've managed to get it in the diary. And I'm more than happy to obviously attend and talk to you at a future date. I have now been in post since July 2019. I was re-elected obviously in May, and I was very pleased to be re-elected because I think there's some really good work going on in the Northumbria area, and actually I think there's some really good examples of what's going on in your areas, particularly across Ashington and Blyth and South East Northumberland. And so what I'll try and do is I'll run you a little bit through the police and crime plan, where we are at the moment. I know that there were some specific issues that the Area Council wanted me to focus in on, which I'm more than happy to talk a little bit to. But what I'll do is leave the vast majority of the time for questions, if that's all right. So I won't regale you with everything that's happened in the last 2 years or so, but obviously we have had a really difficult time. The force has had a very difficult time dealing with a major pandemic, but that hasn't been something that has stopped progress at all. We've managed to consult right across our region on a new police and crime plan. We did have good representation from South East Northumberland on that, and although the plan was initially to use the police engagement bus, which I know some of you have had in your areas, it's been in Blyth Town Centre recently, certainly to do a big kind of regional tour and consult in person. The pandemic put stop to that, and so we had to get creative, and we did have well over 6,000 responses to that consultation, which is more than previous police and crime plans have had. The things that people have told us are important, and none of them will be any surprise to anybody who is a councillor. And so we have got issues around antisocial behaviour that people are concerned about. Obviously within that, people's understanding and their experience of antisocial behaviour is really big and really broad. And so in some places, you know, antisocial behaviour is fly tipping or litter, and in some areas antisocial behaviour is actually low-level drug dealing, which I would say is out-and-out crime. And so we've got a vast understanding within the general public of what they see as antisocial behaviour. And so that is one of the key priorities in the plan. And in my opinion, we have to deal with it as people find it, not as we define it. And so whatever we're doing on that, that's how we'll be approaching it. I've kicked off now an antisocial behaviour task force. Northumberland Council, County Council have been brilliant, the Cabinet member in backing that and saying, you know, you will get involved in this, to bring together all of the councils, to come together to solve problems around antisocial behaviour right across the region, taking into account things like the community trigger, making it easier for people to report antisocial behaviour. And we're starting to look at plans making it easier for councillors to get directly in touch to report antisocial behaviour on behalf of residents, all with a view to making the whole process slicker, and frankly making it easier for people to navigate that gap between the police and the council, because one of the most maddening things that residents have is where they ring the police and they're told to ring the council, they ring the council, they're told to ring the police, and then they're sort of piggy in the middle and they don't know what to do next. And so those are some of the issues that we want to solve, as well as making the environmental improvements. It isn't the police's problem alone, and I think that that's well accepted across our local authorities. And as I said, I'm really pleased with the progress we've made with Northumberland, and I'll hopefully have more to say on that next time we talk. Serious and organised crime is something that people are very concerned about, particularly in Northumberland, the idea of county lines. I know that you want to talk about drugs, particularly in Ashington and Blyth, and so that is very high on the agenda for the police and crime plan, and it's a two-pronged approach. What we need to be doing is obviously the police need to be out there fighting those groups, dismantling them, stopping it from happening, stopping drugs from coming into our area, but also we've got to be doing the prevention work, which is key through the violence reduction unit, which I established when I came into office. And that's all about working with children and young people, working with people who suffer from addiction and homelessness, and moving them away from those things that make them commit crime, so that it's harder for these, frankly, businesses to thrive in areas like Ashington and right across actually our region. I'm pleased with the progress that's being made on that. Just a couple of things to kind of address your questions. In Ashington, there's been Operation Momentum, which has just turned one. If an operation can have a birthday, it's had a birthday. But the key figures there, and I'm probably stealing some of Chrissy's thunder here, but 368 arrests, 27 warrants, 89 vehicles uplifted, £2.5 million worth of drugs taken off the streets, 2 closure orders and 5 people evicted. And if that's not doing something about drugs in Ashington, I don't know what is. And so I'm really pleased with that result. The similar operations, you'll have seen something publicised about Blyth this morning, where a significant amount of drugs have been taken out of Blyth, and we will keep the pressure on. You know, it's something that we regularly, or that I regularly scrutinise with the senior officer team. It's something that I know these guys are really focused on. You know, they want to solve the problems in the areas that are associated with drugs. We all know it leads to the antisocial behaviour. And so I think some real successes, particularly in your areas. Obviously, there's lots of it. And so we need to make it very clear that it's not acceptable and it won't be tolerated in South East Northumberland or anywhere else in the Northumbria area. Violence against women and girls, again, you know, Northumbria Police have actually led the way, I think, a lot of the time, right across the country, with higher than average rape conviction rates, although let's be quite frank, it's still very, very poor. It's very poor everywhere. And some real groundbreaking work on domestic abuse. There's been no removal of focus from that with the new police and crime plan. People are still telling us it's very important to them. And actually, if we look at the profile of violence across our area, a lot of that is either domestic or behind closed doors. You know, we don't have that street gang culture in the same way as you might hear about, talked about in London. I'm not saying it's not there, but what I'm saying is that the vast majority of violence in our region is in fact domestic or committed domestically. And so we've got to keep a focus on that. And one of the things that I'll highlight as a real success is work on the Drive project, which is all about perpetrator work. So what we know about domestic abuse is its pattern behaviour. And so we can remove a victim from an abusive relationship, we can convict the perpetrator. But what we know is those perpetrators tend to recommit and reoffend. And so Drive is all about breaking that cycle. And some of that is overt and working directly with the perpetrator, somebody who consents to it and plays a part in that. And some of it is covert, in that they won't know that they are a subject of the Drive programme, but there's surveillance around them, they're being monitored, and there's conditions put upon them. And again, that's been really successful, and we've just seen funding for that extended for a little bit longer. I'll interject here and just say one of the key concerns for me as Police and Crime Commissioner is the nature of funding that goes into policing. At the moment, you know yourself, I've come from a local government background. I've been a cabinet member on Newcastle Council, and it's been quite a long time that in local government we've had 3-year settlements, or certainly 3-year forecast settlements. There's none of that in policing. Everything is annual. Everything is, you know, we often are finding out about our budget for April on Christmas Eve, and that's not an exaggeration. Last year it came a lot later than that. It was February. And then we get quite a lot of one-off funding pots to deal with ad hoc issues. Drive is one of those. And we need, you know, we're constantly making representations to ministers to say that actually something the size and scale and importance of policing has to have sustainable funding. I think they are listening. There is word of 3-year funding settlement. I'll believe it when I see it, but I travel hopefully, because I do think that will really improve our ability to plan for the future in Northumbria and for other commissioners and chief constables around the country. I've lost my train of thought. So Communication with residents, really, really important. So I do now regular surgeries either alongside our MPs, or if they would rather not, or if they're not doing surgeries at the moment, I do those separately. We are trying to be as transparent and open as possible on the likes of Facebook, social media. There's a monthly newsletter, and I want to be having that kind of two-way conversation with the public about what's going on in terms of crime. So what you'll see from me is more surveying, more questions being asked of the public, asking them for more feedback. And you know, sometimes I want to deal with some of the more controversial questions. You know, we know that prevention is better than cure. That can be quite difficult for a lot of people to get their heads around, and so we need to be demonstrating why we're doing all of that work and what it looks like, and crucially who it affects and how it affects them and how it makes their lives better. The plan itself is all about fighting crime, preventing crime and improving lives. And, you know, I believe that actually if we work together and if we look at things like youth services, I know that myself and Councillor Humphrey have had a really good conversation about motorbike disorder. I know I've had countless conversations with Councillor Purvis about antisocial behaviour, youth services, making sure that we have the right things in the right places in our neighbourhoods, and we have to work together to do that. And so again, I'm committed to doing that both through the Violence Reduction Unit and in a broader sense. And, you know, there's absolutely tons more I could talk about, and, you know, I'm sure that there'll be more that comes out in questions. Actually, I will quite quickly mention the motorbike disorder. Obviously, you came to me alongside the MP for Blyth, Ian Levy, about the idea of purchasing or of getting up and running a motorbike club, you know, somewhere where people can ride safely. That is progressing, although we had a bit of a lapse in communications. That is progressing, and that's the approach that we want to be taking. You know, yes, enforcement, long lens cameras, different ways that the police can crack down, you know, DNA spray and so on. We want people to report where people are keeping these vehicles, but actually we've got to give them the opportunity, these riders, to go and do something that they enjoy and to do it safely and legally and in the right place. And so working with Slicks, we'll be hopefully getting more of that off the ground, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to seeing it in action, although I'm not getting on one of those bikes. So I think probably I will pause, because otherwise I'll start to ramble, and I'll hand over to you for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. That was very informative and a whirlwind tour. But I'm sure that next time you come, we'll have, you know, to give you another update, because, you know, it's fascinating. So we hope you keep coming on a regular basis, because I think every councillor, you know, is concerned about their areas.
Yeah, and you know, crime is one of the most emotive things for people. We have to make sure that the residents of Northumbria, of South East Northumberland and the rest of the region feel safe where they live. And I think some reassuring things that I would say is that this force has the highest level of public confidence anywhere in the country. You know, there's no part of me that, as a police and crime commissioner, that has sleepless nights about what these guys are doing, because I think they're doing a cracking job. I think it's a really difficult job. I think they're underfunded, and I think at times it's really, really difficult for them. But I think they do the right thing, and they do it by the right thing by our residents, and I think our residents recognise and respect that, and I think that's really important. And also, we remain one of the safest places in the country to live. You are less likely to come to personal harm in Northumbria than almost anywhere else in the country, and that includes our leafy shires down south, you know, where all of the investment goes. It's really, really safe here. And so the key is to keep everything moving, to keep delivering, and for us to keep our area that safe, and to retain that level of public confidence in the police. And, you know, that's what it's all about for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask who the two police officers are?
I'll let you introduce yourselves.
I'm Chrissy Skillen. I'm currently the acting inspector at Ashington and Blyth, covering for Phil Patterson at the minute.
Yeah, and I'm John Casely. I'm the neighbourhood inspector for Blyth and Cramlington.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got Kath and then Brian. Kath?
Mine's just a quick one, really, a bit of a joke. No, Kim. You said about the police are doing a fantastic job. I can tell you that definitely are, especially in the southeast corner and Blyth, especially with working alongside them. But can you look at to get them a pay rise, please?
I tell you what, I could not shout louder. The police absolutely deserve a pay rise. Our police staff deserve a pay rise. I think that it's a failing in public sector pay policy that we're sat here without a pay rise. And actually, do you know what? If I'm very fair to my colleagues from across the country, I can't name a Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner who doesn't agree. And so, you know, I think I hope we see some movement on it, and the staff associations certainly are pushing. So yes, on Blyth though, while I'm on it, one thing I did forget to mention was I did say that, you know, the police engagement bus has been in Blyth, which is great. The police are involved in the regeneration programmes in Blyth. Certainly I had some really productive conversations with women in the aftermath of the Sarah Everard case about feeling safe in Blyth, and it was one of the areas where women came forward and said, you know, here's some ideas. We're adopting those ideas. So there's a Safer Streets bid in at the moment with government, which is all about how we move around the region. All of the bus companies are on board, if you excuse the pun. The metro system is also, and one of the things the women in Blyth told us is that they wanted to be able to flag where they didn't feel safe, and so an app that does exactly that is part of the development in that bid. And so I'm hopeful, we were supposed to find out 2 weeks ago on Thursday, I'm hopeful that we'll find out within the next couple of weeks whether we've got that. And, you know, if we do, then that'll be a huge step forward. And Wayside Women in Need, no longer really working on Wayside, have been a huge part of that process in Blyth to try and make the town centre there feel safer for people.
I totally agree with you, Kim, because the bus went down really well in Blyth, and there was a lot of people did come forward, and I think it's amazing that they didn't do that. So at least we didn't see any of them hanging around the street in the marketplace at the time. So we wanted to just position there all the time.
Well,
if only we had 20 buses.
Right, I've got a list at the moment. So Brian, was if you would like to come in, Brian, with your question to Kim.
Well, it's a couple of questions and some comments. Firstly, welcome, and we appreciate the fact that you've come up here to talk to her. You know,
Come down.
You are. You stole me thunder a little bit there, because you mentioned Ashington a few times and Blyth only once at the latter part you came in. I'm an Ashington councillor, and through COVID, my town showed me I was proud to be a councillor and proud to represent those people. And I think the community and residents rose and looked after each other through that very difficult time. The town council, I'm not on the town council now, but the Ashington Town Council supported the police and have done ever since I was on it. One of my questions is that we've got a lot of various cameras around the town. We've got them on the main street. We've got the number recognition cameras, and we've got COVID cameras. Now, the police monitor 2 of those, and NCC monitor the other one. I just think there should be some sort of collection of information there that gives information back, not only to the elected members, not only to the town council or the county council, but also local businesses, because I think that that somewhere along the line reassures them that we're doing something. Because there are people and there are businesses in my town don't know that there's any cameras there. So the reality is, you know, we need to pass that information across. And when we identify people that are breaking the law, we need to come in and emphasise that they have broke the law, and they should be seen as for their consequences. So communications and updates are paramount. I've got to be very careful in what I've said about the police in the past. I've got to be very careful about how you release your press releases about various towns. Ashington has been hit the hardest, and it always comes from a police source. We as elected councillors are trying to lift the area. There's 1 or 2 of the statements in the past 2-3 years that, you know, hasn't helped Ashington, and it didn't need to be made public. So, you know, there are a few concerns I've got for Ashington. I want to bring up something you said about the motorcycle club. I'm a biker. I love motorcycles. Your only problem that you've got is how those young people get their motorcycles to the site that you'll allocate it.
It's part of the plan.
Right, that's fine. And the other thing is, I would like to request that the engagement bus comes to Ashington.
Yeah, okay. Well, the Cameras is probably a little bit too in-depth for me to answer now, but I think that's something that we can take away and have a conversation about. I know that when we talked, Chrissy, there was something about the monitoring of cameras.
Yeah, so obviously the council heavily invested in ANPR cameras. Now that is a sort of a covert policing tactic to a certain extent, in that we don't release any information around that. So that's a bit of a tactical issue, but we can have a discussion outside of here, councillor, about how we'll progress with that. In terms of the local CCTV, that actually sits in our office, so we can respond to that, or if we've got resource and when it allows, we can proactively monitor that as well. But it's a very good tool, obviously, to go back and research if something has happened. But certainly we can have a conversation if there's any other concerns you want to raise about that.
Just on those two things, I totally understand the sensitivity of the number, but people should be aware that that particular system is in place and around the protection of Ashington for the people that are coming in at Ashington and leaving. And as far as the CCTV cameras monitored in the police station, it was originally in the Ashington Town Council, and it was the councillors and the police, they moved it down there. Now, the reality is I've seen some footage there of some very bad driving, and to be quite honest, we didn't really get a great lot of help in the fact of trying to pursue that. So
In the town centre?
In the town centre.
Right, well,
So we can discuss that away from this meeting,
yeah.
but the reality is we're giving you all the tools, whether it be bikes, phones, dealing with the schools, cameras, anything you want to support you. And I agree with you, and I support you 100% in your roles. But the reality is you're undermanned and understaffed.
We are, but we've still got to respond to what the community want and what your concerns are. And I'm sorry that you've had a poor service. I genuinely am, and we can revisit that after this meeting. But what I will do is what my team, the cops on the ground, RPT, they're responding the best they can. They really are. And, you know, nobody wants to, you know, to give a poor service or not respond properly to any complaints. And we certainly want to use and utilise the tools that we've got, and we do.
It's not pulling the service down. We all understand that you're undermanned. There's only so much you can do. But what I'm doing is I'm highlighting the issues and the problems that we see. And without us highlighting that, you don't know what the problems are.
Absolutely, we've got to take on your views, and, you know, maybe it's a communication issue, and we need to improve on that.
Yeah, and I think often it is the case of trying to get the right messages out at the right time. And I think the other thing to sort of move us on, because I know you'll pick that up outside of the meeting, and I think I hope that what you weren't saying it was necessarily a poor service, but just something that needs attention and that there need to be constant communications on, because I know certainly that Chrissy's very committed to the area and to getting it right. On the wider issues about kind of, I mean, I hear you on the way that the public responded throughout COVID. You know, I do my job because I love our region and our area. I know you do your job because you love our area, and I think people responded incredibly well throughout the pandemic. I think you know, they supported each other. I think actually our region, people were very empathetic to the role that the police had to play in policing the pandemic, which I think is a very difficult move, an unprecedented move for the police to have those powers. And we do have to sing the praises. It's really easy at times to say, oh, well, you know, Ashington, that's all about the amount of drugs on the streets. It absolutely isn't. There's a huge sense of community. Obviously, you recently had Northumberland Pride, which went down an absolute treat. I did a walk around with 2 of the neighbourhood police officers recently, and kind of the communication with the public was absolutely brilliant. You know, recognising that not everyone wants to talk to the police. But I'll tell you what, we didn't find anyone who didn't want to talk to the police. Everyone was happy to have a conversation. And, you know, that's as I find it in Ashington and actually right across this area. What was the third thing? Motorcycles. We have talked about, because I agree with you, you know, the idea of getting them to a safe space to ride, but getting there illegally, that's not ideal. So I think the idea was to arrange professional transport to collect them on bikes.
We've got the speeds in place already. We're just crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
You're working out the money, to be honest.
Well, sorry to steal something, but we've got the same problem in Ashington. We've got a motocross site there. So if you can mirror that project maybe in Ashington as well, that would be a real good thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Mark. Mark, would you like to ask him a question?
Probably don't need a microphone, but speeding cars, which is everybody's kind of issue, and it's 24/7 because it's not just, it's through the night, and it's mainly, I mean, and Blyth invested in some of these guns, and I give a lot of money towards a gun in Ashington. So, I mean, what I want to know is the results of them. Where do they again? Can we get any updates on them if they're working, or is the one in Ashington up and running? Because it costs quite a bit of money with my small members scheme money.
I had a discussion with Councillor Gallagher about that, about the results, and I think that comes back to what he mentioned about communication, and perhaps what we need to do going forward is produce a report, not a long report, but just that we've deployed at these times and dates, and some results around what it looks like and what the speeding, was, so that we can feed back to you. Well, actually, and it is a preventative measure. We have to understand that we're not gonna, we don't want to catch loads of speeders. It's there for an educational tool, but I think we do need to get that out to you better and provide you with some updates around when we've been deployed, what times, what the vehicle sort of percentage was going past, and how many were speeding. So going forward, that's something I'm going to do.
You'll know that when Ashington's like a Formula 1 track, it's just a one-way to run the whole thing, and we get speed bumps put down in there, but we don't want a town full of speed bumps, you know what I mean? Because not everybody that's speeding. So it'd be just nice to know, because Phil convinced me very well to give them the money for to buy one, that they're working kind of well, and not just through the day, should I say. I mean, sometimes it's through the night. I live next door to quite close to the main road, and I hear them 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. So, if it's like a 24/7 thing, trying to catch them.
Well, I mean, we only work certain hours, so we don't have a night shift from the neighbourhood policing team at the minute. But there is operational support that come into Ashington quite regularly, so we do have the traffic department who are there on an almost daily basis. So we'll be providing support to us in that capacity. But I think you're right, and again, I had a conversation with Councillor Gallagher regarding that, and it might be that we need to look at some environmental factors which aren't speed hubs, but maybe chicanes, and that kind of thing at sort of pinch points for a community safety aspect. But we need to get the data in about what that actually looks like, and what it feels like on the street, because we need to have some information to support that, to be able to get those measures put in place.
Good, thank you.
And you are relaunching Community Speed Watch?
Yes, I'm actually in a meeting for that tomorrow. Communities, because obviously during the pandemic, Community Speed Watch did sort of taper off, and we weren't deploying our Community Speed Watch volunteers for obvious reasons. But that is very much up and coming. Again, we're trying to recruit new members to it, so we will be increasing the deployment in the area, and that's going to be happening really soon. So that's only a positive thing, which can help us out, and we'll utilise the equipment that you've kindly funded for us.
Fully support with what I can, you know what I mean? As long as it's getting used, that's the thing, and I'm sure it is. Thank you.
So can I just say on that is that, when people are complaining to you about the speeding, and you report it in and we're getting the locations where it's happening, we'd be really keen for you to put out that message about Community Speed Watch, because it really does give us a much wider footprint of speed monitoring in those areas. And it's very easy for people to complain, but it would be even better if they can get involved in trying to tackle the problem. And of course, they get trained, they get the equipment, and they can make a real difference to their own community by getting involved. Anytime.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I've got Daniel next, but before we move on, you know, what could be ideal is if we could get a swathe of land somewhere and for these boy racers to actually have a track to go onto, and then, yeah, I know, but at least they'll be out the way, hopefully. I know it sounds, but you know, they'll be out, hopefully they'll be out the way, and then, I might not work, but it's just, you know, instead of racing around the streets, well, yeah, but they might, well, hopefully they wouldn't, you know, but that's the solution, isn't it? Just getting them somewhere for them, you know, for to play with the boys, because that's what they do. They, you know,
I mean, I
boys
think,
with their toys,
I
yes.
think the difficulty with that, in comparison to the motorbikes, is that it's not legal. So it's not legal to do it at all.
Yeah, unfortunately, but it would, you know, it would give them somewhere to go. Right, Daniel, you've got the next question to Kim.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Kim. My question's probably more directed to my inspector for Blyth. Are there any plans or initiatives, obviously, to tackle, again, similar to Councillor Purvis's question about speeding in Blyth, particularly in my ward, down South Newsham Road, Rotary Way, down the Links Road towards Seaton Sluice, you have cars that go in excess of 100 miles an hour in some instances. And you know, ways to tackle that, you know, would be greatly appreciated. I mean, sometimes it's nipped in the bud for a short period, but it always returns. And residents in my ward always say, you know, what can we do long term for this? And another question was about people who hang about late at night in the beach car park, as the car park, the big one in Kitty Brewster, and the Quayside as well. We have people hanging out late at night, and you know, what initiatives do I have to try and get these people to disperse, because they sit around, they hang about. It might not be causing issues, but for residents in the particular areas, they hear the noise themselves. And yeah, just any initiatives or plans we'll have for that will be greatly appreciated.
Yep, so certainly the areas that you mentioned before, the locations are monitored with the speed camera by us. And the majority of those areas that you mentioned as well are also on the mobile safety van, the speed camera van, for Operation Madero, so they do attend there. And I get returns for how often they've been in those areas, so I can reassure you that they do attend and spend time in those areas, getting us to try and tackle the speeding. But it's similar to what Chris was saying before. It's an ongoing thing. I don't think there's a quick fix to it, and so that we've got to persist with. And again, speed watch in Blyth, a community speed watch, we could do with more people involved in that. We have got a few, but the more the merrier as far as I'm concerned. Because then we can get, like I say, a bigger footprint, and I suppose those people that drive antisocially will see speed monitoring happen on more occasions, so they're less likely to do it. The other things you mentioned about, like the Mermaid car park in South Beach, that has been, I suppose, that's been an area that's attracted the boy races, if you like, for years and years now. And there's been various schemes tried to resolve that. And to be fair, recently, mainly because of COVID, it has quietened down compared to what's been in previous years. However, there is initiatives with the council to look at longer-term problem solving there in the form of either automatic barriers or a gate system, so that the car park can be blocked off after a certain time. But obviously there's other considerations, because there's a fish and chip shop there, and there is genuine people that want to enjoy going down to South Beach as well. I've had recently had an update that the options are being considered and costed with the view to a decision will be made in the future about what they can or can't do as far as that car park's concerned. Because we are aware it's been like that for a long time. It's a really popular place to congregate. But as well as that, any new plans that are coming up for any car parking, such as for the new train line and things like that, our design or crime officers are involved in that process, so they can give opinion on how to design out the attractiveness, let's say, of those areas for them to congregate.
That's fine, thank you. One last thing, in terms of when people go into these certain areas, what about a system, I don't know if this already exists, whereby the licence plates of vehicles are actually logged in case of any incident, so they can come back and say, well, this vehicle was here at this time?
Well, AMPR systems exist that would do that, but then a lot of the time, I have to say, a lot of the time in some of the areas that you mentioned, there's people like us parked there to go fishing, there's people that are parked there for legitimate reasons, so it's how much we want to monitor genuine people going about their everyday business. certainly for the likes of the Mermaid car park, that is one of the options that's been considered. You know, number plate recognition and CCTV. But it's making sure that whatever is decided for a problem area like that's the right solution and not just possibly the easiest solution.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. The next question from Cliff.
Hello, Kim. Thanks for coming. Thanks to the officers for coming down as well. So it's more sort of a comment. A lot of the feedback I'm getting from the people in Newsham are they want to report stuff, but they don't necessarily want to report it with their name on it. Now I know you have the portal on the website, but virtually everybody I've spoken to since I've been elected has said they didn't know about that. So maybe that's something you need to push a little bit harder in the areas, you know. I mean, it's obviously not the emergency sort of crimes. It's things like they see people loitering in the same place regularly, and a couple of days later they think about it and think, oh, hold on, I better report that. There may be something going on. Because a lot of the stuff they were reporting to me, and I was emailing to the couple of officers I've been working with on the bikes, and that's maybe something that could be addressed. But also just about the bikes, going back to what Councillor Gallagher says, it's a great idea. We've got a pilot starting hopefully on the 10th of next month for 10 weeks, running up to Christmas. If it works and if it's successful, we're looking to obviously extend it beyond that as long as we can. But also one of the plans, and I'm working with Silk's Youth Forum with it, and a couple of police officers from Blyth who have been absolutely fantastic as well. And we're hoping to roll it out wider, so maybe it's up Ashington, Cramlington, probably anywhere in Northumberland. The only issue we would have is the distance of travel from the area they're going to be riding the bikes. That would be the only issue.
Yeah, I take your point on the online reporting, and I'll mention that to police comms. And I think, if I'm not wrong, you can also report on 101 anonymously. Right. And actually, I think on 999 as well.
And we're getting a new neighbourhood alert system as well coming in before soon as well. So that's going to be sort of an app that you can download and report on there as well.
Just a thought coming to my head. If you've got something that advertises the portal and the different things, you can give them. If you can pass them. I'm happy to put it on my Facebook page, you know, which spreads through the area. As I'm sure the other councillors probably would be able to as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Like to put your question to Kim?
So my question's relating to the 101 service. I've had a few residents mention the wait time. It's quite increased at the moment, where to the point where they've just dropped out of calls and not bothered to report crime because they're getting the recorded message that we're incredibly busy at the moment. If you want to speak to an officer, press 1, continue to wait, or report it online. So I'm just wondering, is there anything happening around tackling the problem with the wait time when you are busy? Because obviously we understand that you are under immense pressure, but there is crimes going unreported because of the wait time. And the other question that I've got is, what can we do as councillors to be able to help you more, whether it be push for more funding for the Northumberland as a whole, the messaging, what can we do to help you more?
So I think it's imperative that people do report crime, and the police have had a change in systems in the control rooms in the last few weeks, which will eventually make things a lot quicker, but as it was brought in, it naturally made things a little bit slower, and I think we're starting to see that get better. And the awful coincidence is obviously that coincided with the lifting of a lot of COVID restrictions, and so naturally there was a huge increase in the number of people phoning the police, whether it be on 101 or 999. And I think you've probably seen me say in the media, and you'll have seen the police say, that the weekends, as we came through the end of the summer, were all as busy as New Year's Eve. And so, you know, some of that is just demand. And so, unfortunately, the necessity is to push people online for that non-urgent reporting. But the wait times have come down significantly since kind of that peak, and I continue to monitor them in scrutiny because it is something that concerns me, and I think we need to keep an eye on it. They also have had quite a lot of new recruits into the contact centres to try and improve the number of people who are available to answer calls, but it takes a very long time for a call. It's quite a specialised job. In fact, I've spent time in there. It's unbelievable what they do and the way they switch between 999 and 101, and it really, but it takes a long time to learn. And so it's a little bit like the uplift in police officers that we've had. There's over 500 new police officers been brought in since the start of the pandemic, but it takes 3 years to train them. So it's on everybody's radar. And then in terms of, you know, what you can do, I think it really is a case of encouraging reporting, you know, building relationships with your community police officers and the CSOs and the neighbourhood cops, and, you know, helping them with that information. You know, if they don't know about it, they can't do anything about it. And I don't know what else, you know, obviously always pushing for funding. I do think sometimes we are, you know, we don't get the funding in this area that we should have, and so continuing to push for that as well. And again, just that willingness to work together, we solve a lot more problems when we do things that way. Is there anything either of you would add to that?
No, I would just say it's really important that people do report. We base the way that we respond on the reports that we get, so if people don't report things, then we can't make sure that our office is in the right place at the right time. You know, and as far as help that you as councillors can give, then it is maybe that regular message via your own media, social media, about how to contact the police in the various methods. You know, whether it be online or 101 or 999, and the most appropriate one to use for whatever they're going to call. Because I know that a lot of you will field a lot of, you know, people from your areas will come and speak to you, and in almost an expectation that you will report it. But we really need them to get in contact with one of the various methods that's available.
Eileen, I've got you, and then I don't see anybody else. Oh, sorry, Kane. Eileen.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to talk about the community speed volunteer things, because I used my budget for the cameras in Blyth and actually haven't heard anything back, and I didn't know if it actually kicked off with the project or not. You know, I don't know if they've got community volunteers in place, but I would like to know a little bit more about what's happening with them. And then Kath and I put budgets together for a long lens camera or something, and haven't really had any feedback on whether that's been successful or not. Regarding what Daniel was saying about the speeding along the beach car park, there has been a few initiatives taking place because we've been part of them. One of the most successful ones was when we used a lot of other departments. We used public protection in the council, we used the beach warden, the coastal warden, who opened the buildings up at night on the car park, you know, like the lifeguard station and things like that. And someone was watching in that lifeguard station, watching them speed around, then leaving, going up to the Links Road, up to Seaton Sluice and that. And that was really successful because there was about 4 or 5 cars impounded on that particular night alone, right? It would be good to have more of them, but like you say, it's the amount of police that you've got to be able to deal with these is a problem. There is other things to look at in that Mermaid car park as well, not just about gates now, because people don't want to use the beach. I cycle along there a lot, and I'm really scared in case the car's speeding around donut and then clips the curb, flips over and hits somebody. But if we looked at things like rumble strips and that on the bottom, you know, it would stop them speeding and things like that. You know, there's loads of things, but it just seems to have taken so long. This has gone on for years, having these things, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other, and nothing seems to happen, you know?
Yeah, and I think some of that, what you mentioned for that initiative did work really well, but those sort of initiatives aren't sustainable in the long term, which is frustrating really, because you're right, when we do them, they are successful for that short space of time. So it goes back a little bit to what I said before, in that there's a number of solutions on the table. It's finding the right one, the right solution for that environment, and I'll get in touch with you anyway, so that you can be involved in that sort of discussion around what the solutions are and how we can take them forward. As regards the long lens camera, I know that PC Lorraine, who's been speaking to us about it and uses it a lot, is in the process of putting together some returns for you, so you can show what's happened with it. But it has been used to some great success recently, so he's in the process of doing that for you. You'll get to know the results of that. And I suppose it's similar to what Chris says, but as far as the speed guns are concerned that you send out, we do keep a record of when we're using them and where we're using them, so it's not something that's too difficult for us to produce for you. So it's something that I'll take away from this meeting, and we'll get you some, as councillors as a whole, we'll get you some results of what's happening with your equipment that you've funded. But what is important with that was also use that for when we identify an area where there's a high frequency of people using excess speed, then we do feed into the road safety unit for the camera van to go to that location. So it becomes a more of a, I suppose it ups the ante, more of a permanent solution.
Eileen, thank you. Then I've got Ken, and then Paul would like to come in. So Ken, have you got your question, please?
Thanks, Chair. Like Mark, Phil Patterson had his hand in my pocket also. I give him money for 3 electric bikes. Have they been useful?
Well, firstly, they have been very useful, and I've even been out on them myself. There was a report of it, which you'll know about in North Seaton, where there was an elderly resident who'd been victim of a burglary, where somebody had came in and I was out chasing them on the electric bike. So I've definitely, and the rest of the team have also been out on them. They're absolutely fantastic. So honestly, I can't tell you how good they are to get about. We've got some proactive policing operations coming up, and that's written into the strategy of the operation, that they're going to be utilised, because you can get around the back lanes really quickly. People don't hear you coming. So honestly, they've been an absolute godsend. To be honest, we probably don't publicise the work that we do on them as much as what we should. But you know, the members of the community have seen them, and they've actually been quite astonished at how quick they go when we're on them and chasing people around, or just generally out and about engaging people. And we're out actually during the last time we were out on them was Pride, the day that we had the community Pride, and there was lots of the team out and about all day on them. But yeah, no, they've been absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, Ken. I've got Paul and then Brian. Paul would like to come in.
Yeah, it was just really to comment on the Mermaid car park and the links, because clearly, you know, the County Council as a highway authority, we do work very closely with the police on a whole range of activities. We are acutely aware of the long-standing issues along that part of the coastline. So there are 2 schemes that are in design, getting feasibility designs on different options. One looking at different types of barriers at different locations within the Mermaid car park, primarily to strike that appropriate balance between, you know, still enabling people with legitimate access rights. You've heard about people going fishing and dog walking in early hours and late in the evening, but trying to reduce the length at which people can drive vehicles in there, so you know it reduces the attractiveness potentially of people to go there if they're going to be horsing around. If they haven't got a good length of road to do that on, it makes it less viable a proposition for them. So that's in design at the moment, getting costed out. Likewise, there's also a standalone safety scheme and in design feasibility at the moment, looking at the A193 links road between Seat and Sluice to the Mermaid car park, to see what further measures can be put in place along there physically, in terms of, you know, what can we do to make it less attractive and to try and slow the traffic down. One of the things we may well consider as well is looking at average speed cameras. They are extremely expensive to install and to maintain, but it is something, again, that, you know, will drive that behaviour, and that's part of the options that have been looked at and will be looked at going forward. So we will be bringing those forward as options and considering those in the near future, the part of this year's programme.
Thank you, Paul. Brian?
And I think everybody's raised their concerns about the support. And, you know, we're all 100% behind the police and the local authorities to deal with speeding cars. And the reality is, you know, the speed watch, you know, I don't know if it's an idea, but NCC have a yearly letter that goes out to inform everybody about the new rates. So maybe an information pack from the police and what is available there. For example, the off-road motorcycles, the speed watch, and really what you're doing around the town, could go into an envelope with the council tax and be delivered to every house around Northumberland as a cost-saving measure. Same again, it's around about information, it's about communications, but you know, it's more the younger people. And I was just wondering, nothing's been mentioned about schools, colleges. Do we go in there, do we educate these people? Because some kids that go to school have got cars. Some people that go to colleges have got cars. And it, you know, the majority of people are the younger generation. So do we educate them? And do we also, looking at the speed cameras that like Councillor Purvis has bought, you know, they are quick fix, but is everybody around here happy with quick fixes? Because I am. And if we keep looking for the long quick fix, it might never ever come. So the reality is, if we have speed cameras that are moving around on a regular basis, that's a message in itself. So instead of looking for chicanes or whatever, let's get more speed cameras out. Let's get some more fines done, and that might actually educate people to speed.
In response to your question around if we're getting into schools, obviously the pandemic's been really hard for the local neighbourhood teams to be getting in, but we actually have a school liaison officer who regularly, so if there's a specific issue in my area, or John's the same, we can ask the school liaison officers to go in and deliver some bespoke training, whatever that might be. Also, the community safety, they have officers that will go into school and deliver key messages. And recently, the college has actually funded Northumberland College, so that's Ashington and Kirkley, have funded a post for a CSO to be based within the college. So they're in there delivering messages, and that's certainly something we could do around education around driving going forward. But they're in there all the time. So now things are opening up, we are getting back into the schools. But it has been a challenging time with the pandemic.
Could just add, sorry, as well as that, you know, we talk about the speed cameras being like a quick fix. It's not something that we'll stop doing. It's something that we'll always do, even when even if there's other measures in place that, you know, they talk about the ones that are designed for longer term solutions. We'll still do the speed camera enforcement, because we know that that's what concerns the community, because it comes up every single time we consult with our councillors or with the community. Speeding is always high on the agenda, so it is something that's always there, always in the forefront of our minds when we're working there.
Thank you. I've just got one, probably just a comment. That was still, and I'm sure every councillor here has the same issues. It's around parking at schools when parents are taking children to school, and the way they park their cars, and they're putting their children's lives at risk. And for all, you know, and the police are there, and the vans are there, and, you know, and enforcement's there. People are still, you know, doing it, and we're putting children's lives at risk, because even at junctions, they're parking at junctions at these times, and they're racing to get their children to school and racing to get their children to pick them up. And it's really educating parents as well, I think, how to park in a correct manner when they're taking their children to school, and that's a big issue. And I'm sure every councillor that's sitting in here has got issues with that. So I don't know how we can, you know, try to get more parents to say, look, will you please park? Well, there's plenty of car parking facilities in the area. Please use them, and don't put your children's lives at risk, because you can see them letting their kids out on the road, you know, and it's awful. But it's just a comment, because we know that you're doing a tremendous job. But I would just like to thank you very, very much for coming this evening. It's been very informative, and you know, you're welcome to come anytime to give an update. And please, you know, pass all our best wishes on to all members of the police force, because we really appreciate what they do under really, really difficult circumstances. And, you know, I would give them £100 a week rise tomorrow if I could. And I'm sure everybody here would too, because they well deserve it. And thank you as well for working so hard in the community during the pandemic, because, you know, everybody upped their game, and NCC officers, and, you know, and we're all very much appreciated. And you know, you're stretched to capacity, but you're doing a formidable job, and thank you very, very much. If you would like to leave now, I mean, you're very welcome to, you're very welcome to stay, but, you know, I don't know if you want to...
Now get out.
I'm not saying that, but I'm sure, sorry, we've kept you, but thank you so much once again.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for having us.
Would you like to turn the cameras off, please, for 2 minutes? It's not- Thank you, councillors. The next item on the agenda is just to say that we have no petitions, and I don't know if we have any update about previous petitions. No, thank you, Rebecca. Right, well, without further ado, I'm terribly sorry, gentlemen, we've kept you this evening, but we'll have an update now with local services, and I think Stephen's going to kick off with it, and I don't know how brief you want to keep it, so you can get to Thank you. Well, Stephen and then probably Mick. Thank you, Stephen. It's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to hear I've got a very brief report from Ray. On the grounds maintenance side, grass cutting remains on target to achieve the required number of cuts in all areas. It's fair to say we've had some challenging periods this year with some near perfect growing conditions for grass and weeds. I'll come on to those shortly. We've had a spell of warm and wet conditions, but the teams have recovered well, and the standards are where we'd expect them to be now. We're currently on cut 10 in Blyth areas and cut 9 in Ashington areas. On to street sweeping, we're working through our normal schedules, but we'll soon move over to leaf hotspots. You'll have noticed the leaves coming down, so we'll move on to them soon. As usual, please bring any areas that require attention to our attention, and we'll get on to them. Winter works, we're now starting to think about our winter schedules. We'll have all the routine things that we'd normally do, but would welcome any early recommendations or requests from councillors. So please get in touch with Ray with anything you would like to have looked at. Weeds and weed trial. Ray said that weeds have been proved a difficult challenge this year all over Northumberland, but particularly within Ashington, Blyth, Newbiggin, and some outlying areas such as Camas, North Blyth and North Seaton Village. There's a spray ongoing at the moment. I don't know exactly where they are, but I can find out if any members need to know that. We've also deployed staff using the new weed ripping equipment, which seems to be very quick and effective. We've also been carrying out a trial into glyphosate alternatives. This will be coming to an end shortly. We're using different chemicals to try different acids and things like that. We've got one more treatment to do in Ray's patch. Then all results will be recorded and a note produced, and that can be shared with members. On the waste side of things, other than a few minor vehicle breakdowns, staff shortages due to COVID and all the things you'd expect, residual recycling and garden waste collections have gone well. Income from garden waste has exceeded target. A lot of people are buying into the scheme. Income from commercial waste and bulk collections have also exceeded targets. Teams will continue to review existing rounds in an attempt to cope with rising housing numbers. And also the increased take-up of the garden waste service. It does put pressure on the services. Also, in addition to those, the bottle recycling facilities are in high demand. We've had to up the collections on those to avoid having glass on the ground. Also, demand for bulky waste services remains high. Extra slots have been released. We're having to deal with those by running the service on an additional day on overtime. And that pretty much concludes Ray's update. Thank you.
Stephen. Mick, do you want to come in now, or will, if the councillors want to ask any questions to Stephen before I bring Mick in? Oh, sorry, Brian, sorry. Brian? Oh, were you, sorry, I didn't see your hand there. Is it Caroline and not Brian? Right,
Yeah.
Caroline.
So I've got a bit of a question here. I was watching, as rock and roll as I am, on Monday night I was watching Motor Flack. And just with regards to one of the officers mentioned that they were quite happy to clean up outside their house, and maybe that some of the residents should consider doing that as well. Considering residents pay council tax, and in Ashington we do pay for enhanced services as well. Is that really the messaging that we want to be putting out? And I just want to know, yes, we've had a perfect storm this year with weather conditions. Residents don't want to hear that from we. What's our plan going forward for the rest of this year? Because there is still weeds and mess across the towns. And what's the plan going forward, not only for this year, but for next year as well? Because it's going to happen again and again and again. We need to get a hold of it now.
Thank you, Caroline. Stephen, would you like to answer that?
There is a second spray going on at the moment, and they can also target areas with weed rippers for a quick impact. It is always going to be a challenge going forward because the chemicals we use, the weed needs to be visible for it to work, and then it's absorbed in, so you're always going to see weeds. It's up to us to try and get the timing right. And to be fair, a bit of that does come from residents. They're our eyes, and they can tell us where they are, and then we can target it. But it's fair to say weeds are a challenge, and they always will be a challenge.
Thank you, Stephen. So, yeah. Right, Caroline, yeah.
I would say we're into September now, and we're still complaining about the same things that we were complaining about earlier in the year. Yes, it's been the perfect storm, but it's really not good enough. For the money that goes in from residents and for enhanced services, I just really think that we need to up our game a bit. When I went for a walk round, some of the officers that are here tonight were there. There's weeds growing through drains. This does have a knock-on effect, which ends up spending more money because we end up with flooding. And the number of complaints that we're getting from residents, this is an issue that we need to get hold of it. And we can't turn around and say, let the residents look after their doorsteps. They're putting money into this. And we are seeing visibly ourselves as we drive around that the streets aren't clear. And I understand we have problems. We have people off sick, but we're into September now, and the COVID excuse is starting to wear a bit thin. It really is, and we need to get a bit of a hold on this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Stephen, would you like to come back in and answer Caroline's question?
No, comments are noted, but I'll speak to Ray about the specific areas and find out where we are.
Well, I think it's all of Ashington, but I think Brian and then Paul would like to come in. Or would Brian, would you let Paul come in first, or Brian? Right,
yeah,
Paul.
just to pick up on the comment about do we expect residents to clean outside of their own premises. I think we always want communities to take pride and ownership in the location in which they live. That's something that we try and engender, and most communities have significant pride in their environment. That isn't a replacement for the county council's activity. It's in addition and in support of the county council's activity. The more people that take that active involvement, the better it is for everybody, and we will continue to promote and encourage people to do that.
Thank you. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with all the sentiments of my fellow councillor. The reality is we shouldn't be waiting for the problem to arise. We should be more proactive than reactive. I agree the fact that Ashington Town Council put a fair bit of money into a local service. Ironically, they're still confused. I spoke to the clerk before this meeting. There was a rebate given there and there still wasn't any clarity, just money given back. Was it failure of services? Was it failure of manpower? We still don't know. But the reality is we don't want the money back. We want the town to be looking better. That frustration rolled out prior to a request from Councillor Ball and myself at the June full county council, and we had a visit round the town. I had a visit round the town by yourself, Paul, by Ray Whelan's and the portfolio holder. And I'm still waiting on any results or any conversations around that visit, which is like 5 weeks on. Any updates, anything that they're going to improve. And I agree with it. We actually showed you, and you were there, we showed you that there was manhole covers that had things grown out of them. They're not being emptied. They're actually a highway issue. If they're flooding, they become a danger to residents, cars, people trying to cross the road. Or it's just been neglected, the whole town. So when, you know, we don't need to keep, you know, the emphasis always seems to fall back onto the resident or the elected member. The reality is we're in for a routine of programme work from the town. And it needs to get better. The grass cutting, for example. You know, since the invention of the wheel, we're all driving around Northumberland and we see places. And I'm shouting for Ashington here. In theory, this is a Northumberland County Council meeting, but we see places that are groomed and maintained better than what Ashington is. £220,000 a year. Now, the reality is we can't have any of the grass and cut collection because the grass has been left that long. It just clams together. It's a worse state than what it was before it needed cut. You know, the litter, the entrance feature, the entrance coming into the towns, the litter still lying there. That's historic. It was always agreed under the partnership that they would be done every month to 2 months. They're not getting done. Hedge lines. We've got hedge lines that come into our towns that are trimmed at an angle. We need to cut them back so that, you know, cars, you know, within weeks the hedge lines are grown over again and causing damage to cars. We just need a total review, and I'm speaking as an Ashington Town Council, county councillor, and I'm sure all my town councillors will agree with this. It's just not good enough. No, the reality is, you know, you said on that footage, you know, it may be touching onto it in a light-hearted way that residents should go out and clean their own. I did it. I've done the full street in Grousmoor Drive. Took me 20 minutes. I put a request onto Ray to come back with a road sweeper, which he did. And that particular area is great. Let's not wait till the weeds come up. Let's get some manpower in there. Let's get some old-fashioned cleaning of the streets again. And the reality is, I know you're up against it because there is a lot of cars around there. We know all the obstacles, but we're just doing the same old, same old. We used to have a policy that we put it was a blue cake dye in there. That's not getting put in. We don't know where the weeds have been done. We can't even, you're second guessing because we're not even getting any updates. So the reality is, do I feel as though Ashington's been let down? Yes, I do. The main street itself, we can't even get the main street cleaned to a fashion. We can't get it even washed to a fashion. And it'll come back to the highways. You know, we've got parking bays there. That, honestly, it's like all the blocks are loose.
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but we've only got 7:30.
Right.
I know, Brian.
But that's so much.
You know, but we've got a suspense there. I know, and I'm sure that Ned Stephen on his way out.
Can we have, as requested, from the 4th of August, we had a drive around. Can all Ashington councillors please have an update of the train of thought of what you thought of that drive around? That's all we're asking.
Thank you, Brian. I'm sorry, but, you know, I'll have to suspend down and orders in a little bit. And we're all as passionate as yourself, so I'm sure Stephen's taken all on board, hopefully. And I told, you know, Paul at the last meeting that these probably would get a little bit worse every time we had the LAC meetings because things is not getting addressed. So thank you for that, Brian. Local services issues, please. Oh, sorry. I'm terribly sorry, Eileen.
I just want to quickly say, right, it's not just always up to the council to keep everywhere clean. It's up to every single individual. Now, people drop litter. They shouldn't drop the litter, right? We can't. I take pride in looking outside of my street, my path outside of my house. I take pride in doing that, and I think that could well be encouraged, right? You know, because some people do have pride, and it's just that nice. Thank you. People could just do a little bit themselves, and I'm not saying people take all of the work on from themselves, because we do pay for it. But I do think there is something there where people do have pride for their properties, pride for where they live, right? And I think that should be encouraged.
Mick, next. Thank you, Mick.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Just give you a brief update on the highways. All inspectors are out currently, and ongoing maintenance crews continue to work tirelessly inspecting and fixing potholes, making repairs and making safe Category 1 defects right across the southeast area. The gully emptier is also fully deployed on taking the course of all reported issues and cyclic maintenance. We've been carrying out large tarmac patching in Ashbourne Crescent and Ashington Waterhorn Road, Newbiggin, Briley Road in Blyth and Thropton Avenue in Blyth. Cycle and footway patching has also been identified sorry, by the Highways Inspector. It's now being programmed and will start later this month. Drainage improvements have also been identified in several areas, and they will begin to be programmed within the next couple of weeks, depending on meetings with Streetworks and Traffic Management. And normally I wait till November, but I'll stop making this depressed now. Winter maintenance. We are now preparing countywide for the 21-22 season. Obviously, I'm operational lead right across the county. Rock salt's being delivered across the county after a large delivery to the Port of Blyth. We're working with ICL to ensure we have a constant level of deliveries to reach all of our 36,000 tonne starting season level, and the season itself starts on the 1st of November. We're also finalising the installation of a route verifying for the rollout of ExactTrack, which is automated gritting. This will give us a consistent approach to the treatment of the gritting network, increased resilience of drivers and routes, and the ability to seamlessly move resource where required to any issues. I.e., we can send a driver from Blyth to do a route in that he's not familiar with somewhere else in the region. So it gives you, especially with the COVID situation and whatever happens during the winter, it gives that element of resilience. It also gives us a high level of activity reporting, which will allow us to defend litigation. And we also are waiting, in the next few months, we'll get a delivery of 9 new state-of-the-art Mercedes Econ gritters as part of our ongoing fleet replacement programme. And that's as brief as I could make it.
Thank you, Mick, for that. Is any councillor? Yes, Margaret?
It's not about the winter. Look, we've got some new houses at Bates Colliery, Coupin, and the residents have been complaining that they haven't got one light on, and there's quite a few residents moved into that area now, and that I think they've got the columns up there, but there's not one light on. Is it the council's responsibility or the builder's responsibility to put the lights on there?
At that stage, it'll be the builder's responsibility until the roads become adopted and the streetlights come with it.
Can the council not ask them to put the streets that people are living in now, because it's very dangerous for them? Can you not put pressure on the police to get them lights on in the streets?
I'll pass that across to development control. They obviously control all that until it's adopted. It doesn't really come under our remit, but it is still under part of the council's remit. So I'll pass that on to development control.
Because there's quite a few streets now, and there's people living in them. And there's not one light in that area where the old Bates Pit area is.
Yeah, I'll pass that on.
And it's dangerous. Thank you. Next to the school as well, yes.
Thanks, Chair. In regards to when you mentioned adoption there, what's the time period for when we adopt certain areas? Because I've got an area in my patch which is still being looked after by Persimmon, which desperately needs to be adopted as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm sure everyone knows the issues, aye.
Good luck there, Daniel. How many years has it been ongoing? Because beat nearly 20. Oh, well, you've still got time to catch up with us.
So it really depends upon the highway, where the developer's at in terms of the development itself. And fundamentally, what you tend to find is that the complete all of the main construction works within the development before they'll get to the road into a condition that it is adoptable for the county council. And up until that point in time, effectively, it's their responsibility to ensure that it's safe and it's properly maintained.
Right, as far as I'm aware, the site is complete, I think. I know phase 1 certainly is. I don't know about Councillor Carty's patch of phase 2, if that's complete as well.
Some of it's completed, but the council won't adopt it until they're absolutely happy with the condition of it.
Right.
And we all know what it's like.
We'll certainly pass on those concerns to the Highway Development Management team, so they're fully aware of
And
that.
I'm sure the highways are getting, you know, like our enforcement officer at highways are getting stricter and more stringent in what they, you know, before they adopt, because we've seen some certainly disastrous areas, and we think, well, you know, and we report it to our, you know, like Ray, etc., and, you know, and Ruben, to say, you know, go out there and have a look at them before you actually adopt them, because it's going to cost us a heck of a lot of money to get things put right before you. So, you know, it's awful in one respect, Daniel, but in another, the county council would cost a lot of money if they adopted them before it was fit for purpose.
I'm certain we do a better job.
Sorry, Brian and then Margaret. Thank you, Brian.
Update to what we're going to do with the parking bays, because that was discussed that we were going to tar them back in. And could that them results be passed back to the ward councillor, Caroline Ball? You mentioned about the salt bins around the county. Can we empty the bins before we fill them with a couple of shovels in? And is that going to be a policy? Because when we do need them, you're finding that the bottom half is solid because they've been there for years. And about lights, have we fixed the lights on the Spain Road yet? Because there was a large proportion of them out.
With the connection to the Station Road, I've actually received some of the designs, and we're finally costing them out at the moment for something that will be a lot longer lasting. As far as the Spine Road lights go out, when you've got multiple failures, it tends to be a power fault. So that would sit with the Northern Power. But I'll speak to Gavin Barlow about that and get that moved on. I think that was it, wasn't it? The salt bins. The salt bins, yeah. We have this dance every year, and which something, it's not written in policy, but I speak to all the teams that do that work and ensure that that has to be done. It's pointless otherwise. Take it out. We wouldn't use that salt if it's no good. We use it on other things.
Margaret would like to come back.
Could I ask, who does the county own the road from Morpeth Road School in Blyth down to Chestnut Avenue? Does the county own that road? If not, could you find out who owns it for us, please? Because the traffic going down there, where the children are going to school, there needs to be something done about that road, and I'm getting nowhere.
That's a section past Asda.
It's behind Asda.
So yeah, so it's the one that's sort of behind Aldi and Asda. Not Aldi, sorry.
Lidl's and Asda,
Lidl
yes.
and Asda, yeah. I'll have to look at the adoption records and find that out, but I can get the maintenance engineer and take a look at it and get in touch and let you know.
Right, well, thank you.
It'll be long now, because I'm terribly sorry we're going on, but now it's over to Stuart, and a quick update with where we are with the Northumberland line corridor, please, if you don't mind, Stuart. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks, Stuart. Do we have to be out of here by 7:30?
Sorry?
Do we
we'll
have
have to suspend standing orders at 7:30. So, you know, if we go on after 7:30, we'll have to suspend and ask if we can, you know, like, adjourn and then, prolong the meeting.
Fine. Okay. So I'll be as quick as I can, because I'm conscious we've all been here quite a while. So, yeah, thanks for inviting me tonight. I'm conscious that quite a bit's been happening on the Northumberland line, so it's useful to come and give you an update on where we are and what progress has been made. So, oh, I have to turn my back to you to see some of these slides. But, so just a very quick update on, I'm sure most of you are aware what the project is. 6 stations, Ashington through to Newcastle Central Station, 2 trains per hour, operational by 2024, although the target is still very much to have trains operational by December 2023, and we're still working to that target and confident that we can meet that. And you can see some of the journey times there from Ashington into Newcastle, 35 minutes from Ashington, 30 minutes from Bedlington and 27 minutes from Blyth, so a real step change in public transport accessibility, so it's a real positive there. Quite a few achievements in the last 12 months. We've been working, the team's been working really hard, so some key milestones we've met. The public consultation we had back in the autumn, that was virtual, given the circumstances we found ourselves in, but I think it was very successful. We got a significant amount of feedback, over 1,000 responses, with 92% people being fully supportive of the project, which is great. We submitted an updated business case to the Department for Transport as part of the project speed process, and that's the government process to try and accelerate these infrastructure delivery projects. So that's really gained us some momentum in terms of getting it through the DFT approval, so that's been a positive process. And the final outline design for the 6 stations has been submitted to Network Rail for approval also. We've started submitting the planning applications for the proposed stations. 5 of them are in. I think the following slide I can give a bit more detail on that. And the application to the Secretary of State for the Transport and Works Act order was submitted in May, has been accepted. We've got the pre-inquiry meeting on this coming Tuesday, with the inquiry programme to start in Blyth Civic Centre on the 9th of November. So that will provide us, assuming that Transport and Works Act order is successful, that will provide us with the powers to compulsory purchase the land that we can't secure by negotiation, and it also gives us the level crossing orders. So as I say, that's due to start in early November and due to run for about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how many objections we overcome in the meantime. Some more achievements. So back in, I think it was February or March of this year, the Secretary of State announced £34 million of funding to allow us to maintain momentum in the project. So that's allowed us to accelerate the design, accelerate negotiation with some of the landowners to secure some of the land we require. And also 17 million of that went to Network Rail for some of their early enabling works. So you may have seen Network Rail out on site over the past 2 or 3 months. And I think to date they've done about 6 kilometres of re-railing works. And that's what Network Rail have defined as quick win solutions, that regardless of whether this project goes ahead, those works would be required in any event. So there's no loss in that respect. And a couple of other things to update on. So the full business case will be submitted to the Department for Transport in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's the final stage in the business case process. And then that will be presented to the Rail Investment Board in October, with a view to us receiving full funding early in the spring. So that's the final hurdle in terms of the business case process. And also some of the archaeological works and ground investigation works are currently taking place. There's some more to be done. Conscious that that's some disruption to people, so I apologise for that, but hopefully people realise that, you know, that's a necessary thing that we need to do to understand what lies beneath in terms of any risks, in terms of underground things that we need to mitigate. So that work is ongoing. Planning and consent. So we've already received consent for Chase Meadows Footbridge. Ashington Station, I see, received planning approval, I think it was last week. And just yesterday, Northumberland Park Station was granted approval by North Tyneside Council. So getting some real momentum in terms of the planning approvals that's going through the system just now. The station applications for Bedlington, Bebside and Seaton Delaval hopefully will go to Planning Committee in the next 2 months. And as I said there previously, that the Works Act order inquiry confirmed for the 9th of November in the Civic Centre. Applications still to be submitted for Newsham Station, a bit of a delay there, of course, to do some additional flood surveys to inform the Newsham Station application. And Palmersville Dairy in North Tyneside and the Hospital Underpass in Ashington due for submission imminently. So location, specific updates. So as I say, the Ashington application has been approved And hopefully we'll all agree that's a real catalyst for the regeneration of the town centre. And as agreed at Planning Committee last week, some compensatory planting of trees at People's Park to offset the loss at the extension to the car park at the hospital, at the station. Hospital level crossing to be closed because of the increased risk due to the significant number of people using that level crossing and the increase in the number of trains crossing there when passenger services come into being. Bedlington, we now have Morgan Sindall appointed as the contractor to deliver the stations. The buildings at Bedlington Station are going to be used by Morgan Sindall as a location, as a hub for the workers there during the station construction, but they will be put back into use for future use, and so Network Rail are leading on that and to see what the opportunity is to use the station buildings at Bedlington for future use for the community. So that's a real positive and something that Morgan Sindall have really brought to that. And given feedback from the stakeholder consultation, there's been a change to the parking strategy for Bedlington Station, given the feedback we had in terms of the proposals at Ravensworth. So there's been some change there into the planning application. And Blyth, as I say, hopefully Bebside and Newsham will go to Planning Committee in the next couple of months. Real benefits that those will bring, and the dedicated foot and cycle pedestrian bridge over the A189, that's part of the Bedside application. So that will bring real benefit in terms of the Chase Farm Drive estate, provide pedestrian and cycle access over to the station at the back of Asda there. So I think that's a real positive we can bring there. A few highlights that we've, and Rachel Bateman, she hoped to be here tonight, but had childcare issues. So Rachel's been doing a huge amount of work in terms of the wider social value this can bring, because I've always been really keen that it's not just track and train we bring here. The wider community benefits need a lot of work, and Rachel's been doing a huge amount on that. And the Dale School in Blyth, you may have seen, they've had their Pacer train delivered, and that's going to be a real wider education facility they're going to use that for. You may have seen Michael Portillo was up in the last couple of months doing some filming in the area. So that'll be for Great British Railway Journeys. I think is due to be televised next spring. So that'll bring some real positive press to the project. Northern Trains ran a series of job-ready workshops in terms of employing local people to become future train drivers. So that work's already been done. I think there's more to be done that Northern are keen to do. And there's a jobs fair plan for the 13th of October. So really keen to maximise the employment opportunity for local people as part of the project. And Rachel and the team are working with Network Rail and Nexus in terms of bringing some railway safety resources, so as soon as we're able to go into the schools, to start working with the schools in terms of safety at level crossings, in terms of future employment within the rail industry, and in terms of future opportunities, in terms of people being able to access further education by train. So we're really keen as soon as we can to get into the schools to start that work. The Northumberland Line website, we're conscious that that's probably fallen into a state of disrepair in the last couple of years, so that's currently being upgraded and will be relaunched in time for the Transport and Works Act order inquiry in November. Business support, we're really looking to get out to businesses to help them understand what opportunities the train line can offer them. That's going to commence fairly shortly. And you may have picked up that as part of the work that Northern are doing, they're starting to train their drivers up to understand the network, to understand the line. So over July and August, there were 5 or 6 familiarisation services that ran, that got the Northern guys familiar with the route, but also gave us the opportunity to be out on site to understand the impact of the level crossing downtown on the wider highway. So that'll give some learning there that we've picked up on. And also one thing that Rachel is working with Network Rail, in the autumn there's going to be some track visits. So either through the communications channel, inviting members of the public or the Northumberland Line champions. It's going to be limited numbers, but get the opportunity for people to get their high-vis on and get on track with the Network Rail guys to understand what it is we're doing to raise awareness of the project. So I think that's a real opportunity just to get people, the local community, out and understand what it is we are doing. So I think that's a quick canter through from me, but I'm happy to take any questions if we have any.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That was very informative and we're bang up to date, so I do appreciate you coming and doing the presentation. I've got, first of all, Alex and then Kay.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I was at the planning meeting when Ashington was passed, and one of the big contentious issues for Ashington was car parking. Now, I know this is not a planning committee, Chair, but I think it's going to be something that's generic at all the stations. It's all the planning, all the involvement has been about rail users. I want to ask a question about the residents who already live there and will not be using those train services. There'll be signage telling rail users where the car parks are, how long they can park there, etc., etc. Will there be signs to protect residents to stop those who can't get in the car parks from parking in cul-de-sacs, housing estates, residents? Can we, Stuart, please, in each application that we see that as a condition? Can I also take the time to thank you for looking at the comments made about the proposed car park at Ravensworth and taking it to Little Street? That was a very wise decision, may I say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alex.
So in terms of the car parking, so the designs of the car park have been based on existing use for Bedlington and Ashington in particular, where we're kind of incorporating them into the wider town centre parking strategy. So that'll take account of the existing use and catering for the existing demand that we predict will be needed by the early 2030s. So it's a long-term strategy in terms of provision of the future car parking. But what we will do, and that was something that came out of the Cabinet decision last week, is over the first 2 years of opening, or probably the first year, continually monitor use of the car parks to understand how quickly they're reaching their capacity. So that will inform a decision of whether we need to start to introduce long, medium or short stay spaces to control the use of that. Because as you say, what we can't have is, you know, the rail users arriving at 7:30, filling up the car parks, and then there's no use for people who want to use those car parking spaces for their day-to-day use throughout the day. So you will continually monitor the use of the car park to really understand what's going on there and respond accordingly.
Thanks, Chair. My concern is the resident who has lived in their home for donkey's years, isn't going to use the train, but can't get off his drive because a rail user has parked his car outside that resident's house. Can we see that the signage is erected in advance at these potential areas that I'm identifying? I can give you names for Bedlington. I'm sure Ashington councillors can give you names for Ashington. Rather than later, can we do it preventative rather than reactive?
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Thank you.
Could we agree suspending standing orders, please? Thank you. Right. Is anyone? Ken, you're next.
Just a quickie, Chair. Will the trains be electric?
So rolling stock is wrapped up in the DFT's review of rolling stock across the whole of the north. So that's a DFT decision. So for the first 2 to 3 years, it's going to be diesel rolling stock because that's all we have available just now. But as part of the wider review of rolling stock across the north, we'll be looking at alternative solutions. If I'm honest, I doubt it'll be electric. You know, there's different rolling stock coming forward. There's the bi-mode things that, well, I say I doubt it'll be electric. It may well be bi-mode. By that I mean on the East Coast main line, it can connect to the electric wires to charge the battery, and then between Benton Curve and Ashington, it can run on the battery and then back to East Coast main line to recharge the battery. So the whole host of options that we'll work with DFT to look at what the options are, but on day one it will be diesel rolling stock.
Thanks.
Okay, Ken. Caroline, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think you know my issue with the hospital underpass. I was disappointed to hear yesterday that basically it looks like it's going to go ahead as planned. I just want to know why there's no movement at all on this, when literally if we could move this 100 metres to where we're talking about compulsory purchasing the land of the current Malhotra site, and basically having this underpass come out from a car park to a car park so it limits the negative effect on the residents in that area, because there is so many concerned about antisocial behaviour, the increase in crime is, and there's real fears around that underpass being there. And I just think it looks like it's been decided upon. It's been presented that if it doesn't go ahead, the railway line won't go ahead, which is a lie, is because we know for a fact there will be other ways around it. And I just think the residents need to be listened to. And yes, we're having an inquiry. Yes, it's going to planning, but to everybody, it just seems like it's going to be swept under the carpet and it's going ahead whether we like it or not. So why can't we look at that, moving it just 100 metres literally up the road?
Thank you, Caroline.
So,
Stuart, would you like to come in?
Yeah, we have listened to the residents. We've looked at it again. We appreciate it's a really, concerning issue for the local residents. If we were to divert the level crossing 100 metres, that would be an additional diversion for people who currently use the crossing. There would be almost certainly objections to that. There would be a delay to the programme. So as things stand, the only realistic solution we have to maintain programme is to submit the application for the underpass. And we appreciate there will be objections, but any alternative solution we put forward, we'd anticipate significant objections to that. So that will go through the planning process. We understand it's a difficult one, but as things stand, the underpass is the application that will be submitted.
Okay, Caroline. I know not the answer you wanted to hear, but never mind.
I was just going to say, I find it beggars belief when we've got traffic lights on the A19 and thousands of cars fly along the A19 and we trust people to press the button and that cars will stop when on the A19 just beside Moor Farm roundabout and we don't trust people to be able to cross when there's 2 trains an hour, where we let them have thousands of cars travelling at 70 miles an hour in that area. And I just think it either needs to be close to the right of way or we need to move it. And I understand this is what's going to be submitted, but we're not listening to the residents. And I just think it's really not good enough.
I mean, in terms of, trusting, it's Network Rail policy to ultimately remove all level crossings across the whole country. So because of the risk associated with them, and I guess it's the perception of that level crossing just now, given that there's, infrequent freight trains run by there, and the step change in risk associated with that, with the increase in number of trains passing there and the speed of those trains coming from both directions. So that's why the crossing has to be closed. But, we completely understand the concerns of residents, but, and it's number one and kind of my worry list and number one in our risk, but yeah.
As I say, we understand that there needs to be something there, like there needs to be a crossing in place, but it's just the location of it. It comes out from a busy estate on one side into a residential elderly community, and for the sake of 100 metres up the road from car park to car park, leading into the town centre, where surely that's where we should be directing traffic to anyway. And a lot of the service users are young people that are travelling from the high school in the numbers that I've come across. So I just, for the sake of 100 metres, why isn't it being moved? But I'll leave it there because obviously you know all this already.
Thank you. Brian?
I'm as passionate about that as my colleague. What I would ask is the self-evidence relationship is that when the survey came back, I think it was 535 people were crossing that crossing during the day, which I found very hard to believe. Can I request that we do another survey just to see how many people go, and maybe pick 2 or 3 dates to get a proper identification of number of people that are crossing there? Because in theory, we've only got 2,000 kids go to that school, and most of them will travel off Station Road or Green Lane, mainly Green Lane. So and it puts weight to the argument both ways. So the other point I was going to make was we've had conversations around the foot crossing by Doves, just off North Seaton Road. That is owned, as we've found out, that it's owned by NCC, but it hasn't got any disabled access over the top of there. Is there any developments or thoughts around that, of getting anything done on there?
So I did pick that up with Patrick Smith, and he mentioned that it is on the programme of maintenance, and we're going to see if that could be brought forward to coincide with the Northumberland Line Works, if there's any, you know, possessions in place that makes it easier to do that maintenance. I think it's just maintenance. I don't think there's the opportunity to make it accessible in terms of ramps. I don't think the funding's there to do that, but I'll follow that up again with Patrick to see when that work is likely to happen.
And again, you know, thank you very much for all the work that you've done up to now.
Well, I don't think there's any other councillor has any questions. So thank you for the update, Stuart. It's greatly appreciated, and it's lovely to see it actually progressing after all these years. Because I remember sitting in with you years and years and years ago, and finally it's come to fruition. I'm sure we all have seen that, but unfortunately, you know, there are areas that we're not happy about. But you know, what can we do? I think it's
money we put in at the very beginning, 5 million of the study.
exactly, and it's all back down to money again, unfortunately. But thank you very much, Stuart. It's greatly appreciated.
Not at all. Happy to come back again.
Thank you. Yeah, very entirely up to yourself, but I'll just move swiftly on to Paul now, because he's going to give an update on the local transport plan, if you don't mind. I don't know how quickly you can do that.
I'll go
Paul.
through it quickly as I can. So obviously you've got the report in front of you. It does cover the LTP and provide an update, and also looking at the process for setting next year's LTP. So I think there was a couple of key things in there. We did set the programme at just over 19 million because that was based on the forecast allocation we were going to get from DFT. We didn't know that at that point in time. We actually received more funding than we expected from DFT, which is a positive thing. So we were able to add the reserve schemes into the programme. So the overall programme is just over £25 million. There's also been £15 million committed by the County Council on an enhanced programme from its own financial resources over a 2-year period to do further works on UNC roads and footways across the county, and a £5 million allocation of that 15 in the current year. So a lot of work going on at the moment. You'll see from the paper that touches on other projects across the county, just to give that county-wide overview, just to, I think, highlight the scale, complexity and the range of schemes being delivered by the council across the county that include your usual stuff around safety and general maintenance, but also a lot of work around structures, bridges in particular, and some very interesting and difficult schemes being undertaken on that, and also a major landslip at Todsteads where there's been a lot of geotechnical work done to try and protect the road, which is a key highway down the Corcoran Valley. In terms of the Blyth and Ashington local area, what we're looking to do going forward is to provide, similar to what we do with the members' local improvement schemes, a more detailed individual programme of activity to report back to the area councils on a regular basis, probably on a quarterly basis, to give that further detail about where individual LTP schemes are within your patch, so you can help track that, so you don't have to listen to me bleating on at these meetings instead. But just to give you the flavour for where things are at within the local area, on the integrated transport side, there's 31 projects being undertaken in the current financial year. 7 of those are complete. That includes 2 urgent safety schemes that have been requested by the police to do additional works on signage and road markings on the A189. There's been a reduction to speed limits scheme introduced between Woodhorn to Linemouth, a traffic management scheme at Cottonwood Green in Blyth, improved directional signs for parking in Newbiggin, and improvements for pedestrian and cyclists around Parkway to Collingwood Road in Newbiggin as well. There's a further 3 schemes where the orders have been issued. These include works to provide a pedestrian refuge in Long Park, Newbiggin, a safety scheme at Woodhorn Roundabout on the A189, which is again looking at line refreshing and improving the number and enhancing the number of advance warning chevrons to help slow drivers down approaching the roundabout. And also a significant safety scheme on the A196 North Seaton Road, B1334 at Newbiggin Road in Ashington, to put in a new puffing crossing, as well as other associated works in terms of build-outs and things as part of that scheme that will be a significant improvement to the road safety for pedestrians and cyclists in that area. There's a further 18 schemes in design. We've already mentioned there's a couple of feasibility designs going on for things around Mermaid Car Park and the links, but there's also a whole host of other pedestrian and cycle improvements that are in design at the moment. We also have got 2 of the 20-mile-an-hour schemes in design, one for Grace Darling campus at Newbiggin and another at Croftway Primary School in Blyth. The works to do the design for the improvements to the slipway in Newbiggin are just about finalised. We're just finalising the costings of that, so that will be ideally going ahead before the winter's in and cracking on with that. And we're also doing some additional pedestrian crossings at both Milburn Road and Links Road, Blythe, that are in design at the moment as well. On the carriageway maintenance, we've got 18 schemes going. There's 10 schemes complete, doing major resurfacing works. A range of sites, including Bedlington Station, a couple in Newsham, and 2 in Ashington and 1 in Bedlington Station as well. And then 5 microsurfacing schemes that have all been completed, again in Ashington and Blythe. We've got 3 schemes in design for resurfacing activity at Swaledale Avenue in Blythe, Simonside Terrace, Newbiggin, and Laverackall Road, Newsham, and another 5 schemes that are still being programmed and are going through that feasibility stage. So as you can see from that, it's a really active programme with good progress being made against that, and we're continuing with that. In terms of looking ahead, the next financial year, we will be just making that estimate in terms of what we think the DFT are likely to give us. That we are out at the moment looking for priorities from members and town and parish councils. The deadline for submission to that's the 8th of October. There will be an LTP workshop once we've gone through and ranked those to discuss those with members, as is the normal process. And that draft programme will then be presented to the LACs in February before being finally signed off in March to again start the whole process again of getting on the ground and getting them in and done and dusted. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any members would like to ask any questions? Liz?
It's not a question, it's just the slipway at Newbiggin, Paul, the work's going to start at the end of October. I had an email today.
Jeff, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, I'm glad we're going to do that workshop again. It's really good. And new members, I would encourage you to, get to that, because it's where actually things get talked about and decided, and some of the schemes actually you get on the programme, and they get prioritised, they get done. It's great. So do go. If you've got something else to do, cancel it and go to that instead. So that's great, because but the only thing I would say about this report is that, to me, every time I read it, it just goes to show how little money is actually spent in Blythe and Ashington when you look at the rest of the programme.
Yeah.
So I realise why you do it, but it kind of just depresses me sometimes. I realise that, Northumberland is big and we have to spend the money where it needs to be spent, absolutely. But I do get a bit depressed when I see that out of £25 million that's being spent, less than 2 million of it is being spent in Blythe and Ashington. So anyway, that's just so. And I don't know whether there is some way we could have the report, and I think Mr. Jones alluded to that. That I think all area committees should have a report about what's being spent there, rather than us see everything. And I realise why you do it. And I guess it's a fine line between telling everybody everything and then just telling us, these were your priorities last year, and these are the things we actually did. I think that would probably be, I would appreciate that more than seeing that, we spent £1 million on a bridge that I've never been over. And I totally know that has to be spent, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but the kind of the parochial part of me thinks, well, why didn't that avenue that I wanted done get done? Well, so anyway. Again, I would ask the administration to think about why these area committees are actually set up in the first place. If you remember 8 years ago or 4 years ago, whenever it was, the local area councils were going to have a budget
and they were going to have things to do, and what we decided here was going to be what was done, rather than the way that it is. It's kind of, here's 25 million quid, you're only going to get 1.5 million of it, and this is how we're going to spend it. So the local area councils were supposed to be a decision-making body, and I haven't seen a decision made yet that actually, you know, made a difference or contributed, or I feel as though it was something I wanted done, and it doesn't get done because somebody further up the chain decides that, no, actually, the LACs aren't going to have any power at all. And that's, I'm not asking you to comment on that, Mr. Jones. And the only other two things, I think I've put them in the system, but I think we need to have some sort of speed indicators, roundels or on the road on Rotary Way, because that's, you know, it's the only road in Blyth apart from South Newsham Road that Councillor Carl managed before. It's actually 40 miles an hour, and if you drive down there, the roundels are all faded. There's no real indication of what the speed actually is, and there's a lot of people would like to see it 30, but that's a discussion for another day. But there's something needs to be done there about reminding people what the speed is. So I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Jeff. I think a lot of our councillors sitting here could say that some of the markings on the roads could be refreshed, because they are throughout the southeast of Northumberland in an absolutely disgraceful state, and they're fading, and people can't understand the 20 mile, 10 mile, you can't see junctions because it's faded so much. So it would be lovely to see if we could get some sort of programme, you know, town by town, to see if we could just start refreshing the towns and villages with the road markings, because that would be greatly appreciated. And the other thing is, Jeff, I'm sure it's our turn to get millions spent on Ashington and Blyth, you know, this time round. I'm sure the officers are sitting here taking all this on board. And Bedlington.
You
and
promise me you won't hold your breath, because I wouldn't want to see you going blue.
Thank you. Would you like to come back in there, Paul? Have you got any comments to make about that?
I think in terms of the signs and the lines, there has been additional funding allocated to a capital programme within the LTP to do that, but we are prioritising that on a safety basis, so it is stop and give way signs and things such as that we are prioritising. But if there are particular areas and particular concerns, we're more than happy to have a look at that, and the highway inspection team do try and pick up on areas that are a concern, particularly looking at safety issues in particular.
Thank you, Paul. I've got Brian.
Just coming back to Jeff's point about the bridge, I've been up to have a look at the bridge, and yep, it looks nice. It's a lot of money. I wouldn't get my car across it, so you know, the reality is it value for money? And I know that history's got to be protected, but that's another thing. I just want to ask your opinion on the surface dressing and the micro surface and dressing. We've started to use it for a number of years now. Do you feel as though it's value for money? And the other thing is, what kind of warranty do we get off the contractors when we do that type of work? The other question is around potholes. Can we have a review of how we fix potholes? Now, I know that the staff try and get in there and try and fix them as quickly as they can to get the traffic moving. But I think the road being stopped or closed off to get a proper fix might give longevity to the roads. And, you know, it is a hard call, but I just think we need to have a review internally of how we deal with potholes.
So in terms of the two questions, the first one, I presume you're talking about microsurfacing as opposed to just surface dressing more generally. So microsurfacing is a technique that's come to the fore in recent years. It is a nationally recognised treatment to prolong the asset life of highways, so we use that effectively similar to what you would do on rural roads where you do tar spraying and chipping. It's a similar but not the same process. That fundamentally both improves the waterproofness, it basically reproofs the road surface, but also improves the running surface and the tactile and the speed, the skid resistance of the road surface as well. So basically, it does offer real good value for money in terms of prolonging the asset life. You get anywhere between 7 to 10 years, additional asset life on that from that treatment, and you can continue to repeat that treatment going forward as well. So it is a really good value for money way of prolonging the asset life of parts of the network that are literally getting on the last legs and need to be sorted. In terms of the guarantees, we do have a 12-month effectively warranty on any issues in relation to the laying of that material. So if it's coming away from around drain covers and things such as that, or if it's just basically not taken to the surface properly. And also a 3-year guarantee in terms of any material failures, in terms of just, delaminating from the road surface as well over that 3-year period. So we do use it across the county. It is a seasonal issue. You can only use it in certain weather conditions, but it is something that, we are continuing to do because it does offer really good value for money and enables us to do more highway improvements than would otherwise be the case.
Paul, I don't want to be facetious, but if I went to Phoenix and bought a TV, I get a 2-year guarantee on it. This is a highway. We need to be looking at better warranties within the highway work. And it's great to think that it's going to last 7 or 8. We're just putting back the issues and the problems. And, I've started to travel around the county. I was at Hayden Bridge and I've been north of Alnwick. And some of them B-class and C-class roads are absolutely tremendous. I would love them on some of our main streets, never mind the C and B roads. So, it's something that has to be reviewed and something that has to be looked at. Because we're looking at longevity, just get the work done and get it done right. And, if you are painting your front bedroom, you know what I mean, you would make sure that everything was sanded down and everything was done right before you even started. And I just think that we're just putting off work with a very thin covering. And that's why I said, how long have they been in? 4 or 5 years now? What is your opinion now of the work? Do you think it maintains it and it does what it should do?
Yes, is the simple answer to that. And I think that the other thing is in terms of, is it a proper job? Yes, it is a proper job. And fundamentally, by using those techniques, it means that we can effectively maintain more of the network to a good condition than rather having areas fail and then have very significant revenue maintenance costs trying to patch those areas, because fundamentally we wouldn't be able to afford to resurface the large areas that we're talking about that we can actually treat with this material over the same time frame. So it gets best value for the resources we have available to us.
That's good enough for me. If you feel as though that's the right way to go and the longevity of the county, I totally, but the questions had to be asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I've got one more question and then we'll get cut off at the knees. Right. Eileen?
It's not a question, it's just to bring to your attention, Chair. It's absolutely really cold in this room, right? There's a few members really sitting here freezing and the meeting's going on and on and on. I'm just wondering if we could actually get on in.
We're going to wind it up now, Eileen. Thank you, because you're the last. But I'd just like to thank the officers very much for coming this evening. It's been a long meeting, but it's been very worthwhile. So I do thank you. Safe journey home. And I mean, there's just a couple of notes now, but if you want to leave, that's fine. I'm just going to carry on if you don't mind. And number 14 on the agenda is the appointment outside bodies. Now, I must say there was just a little bit a hitch with the names in the last minutes, Rebecca, and it was for the Community and Voluntary Action Blythe Valley, and it was actually Anna Watson, and it wasn't Alex Wallace. So it's just to make a note of that. And we still need, if possible, to have a volunteer for Northumberland Community Voluntary Action. And I don't know if anyone here this evening would like to take it on board, or if not, you can just contact me and then I'll pass it on to Rebecca just to move things on. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is item number 16. Oh, sorry. Item number 15 is just to note the local area council work programme, which I'm sure everyone's done, unless anybody's got any questions on that. No.
Chair, can I just quickly mention, if you don't mind?
Certainly, Alex.
My colleague brought to my attention, we all know how long tonight's taken. If we look at November, and I forecast it'll take just as long with the number of items that's on that agenda, and I really think it needs looking at, Chair. And that's November, so it gives you time to do it. Thank you.
Well, I think by when the winter comes in, Alex, we're going to be looking at starting it earlier, because obviously, you know, and maybe it's not putting as many items on the agenda, you know, just to try to keep it, maybe put, you know, we'll have less on the agenda at times, because if we're going to have planning and, you know, I mean, especially that's gone on, it wouldn't have taken as long, but I think we're going to have to start looking how much we've got on the agenda when they're both on.
Yeah,
Eileen?
can I just come back on that? I think Alex has got a point here about how many items is on the agenda, but I also think there's something here where you could actually perhaps monitor how long people are speaking, you know, when they're asking questions and things like that, and maybe limit the amount of times people can ask a question on a particular subject. It's how many times, how many times can people come in and ask a question? It's gone on and on and on, but Alex is right, the agenda's long, and we never used to have meetings this long, so I really severely think it needs looking at.
Well, I do appreciate that, Eileen, but the fact is, you see, there's some items on the agenda that we cannot take off, you know, and if you want to invite a speaker, you know, like him, because I'm sure people are interested in what's going on, and unfortunately, I think the planning, you know, sorry, but I think the planning applications, the planning meeting should be a planning meeting on its own, and I think that's maybe something that we should look at, because obviously we wouldn't have gone on as, and I mean, Kim was sitting waiting for it to come in, and the officers, we've had them sitting, and I do think we've got to think, well, planning should just be planning, and the rest of the, you know, the agenda just needs to be separated.
I do think it's about how many times people are speaking as well, and I'm not trying to diss anybody, because every comment that's come out here tonight is absolutely valid, right? But it's about perhaps doing it.
No, not yet. Wait a minute. Yeah, right. I take that on board, Eileen, and I'm sure, yes, we'll look at it. Yes, and I must apologise, because I've been one of the worst offenders. But it was just in planning, though. Right. No, so obviously we'll just leave that open then for the community volunteer, unless somebody wants to take it on board at Ashington. no volunteers. We'll bring that back. Now, the next thing is just to note the local area council work programme. I think I've already mentioned that. And the next item is the date of the next meeting, which will be held on Wednesday, the 13th of October, and it's planning only. So it's planning only. So whether we've got any planning applications for then, I don't know if Brian can give an update up to now if there's any or not.
We haven't got any planning through at the moment, but I've been talking with the executive directors, and a minimum of 3 applications should be brought into every meeting. So, you know, you're not going to have 6, 7, so it'll be 3. This one tonight was a very, very difficult one, because we wanted to go with our hearts, but you had to go, and Alex was the one to say it.
Yeah, it was, and I know it's greatly appreciated. And I thank everybody for coming. But you know, but obviously we'll start looking at how many items are on. But I do think that planning should just be planning, and I don't know if we could just, you know, if anybody's agreement with it, instead of putting planning and the lack on, and just having planning to plan. I don't know, you know, Chair, the plan, if you could, how we could move that forward. Oh, right, lovely, thank you. And the next item, 17, is any other urgent business? No. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And everybody can go home now and have a nice drink. Sorry, you can turn the cameras off.